Blood pooled on the marble floor of the mansion while the blizzard howled outside. In that moment, Mei-Lin Zhang knew she would either die tonight or kill the man who tortured her for 3 years. Victor Hale raised his fist again, and she stopped flinching. Something had broken inside her, not her spirit, but her fear. The richest man in Oakhaven was about to learn what happened when you push someone past their breaking point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began, and I promise you, by the end, you won't believe how far one woman can fall and still rise again. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and let's dive in. The first time Mei-Lin Zhang saw Oakhaven, it looked like a painting. That was 3 years ago, when hope still lived in her chest like a small, stupid bird. The train had carried her west from San Francisco, through mountains that turned white with early snow, past forests so thick you couldn't see 10 feet into them. She'd pressed her face to the window, watching America unfold in all its brutal beauty, and thought maybe, just maybe, this country would let her build something new. She'd been 23 then, young enough to believe in fresh starts. The town sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that scraped the sky. Main Street ran straight as a rifle shot, lined with buildings that tried too hard to look civilized. A bank, a general store, a church with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left, like it was embarrassed to be there. 3 saloons, because apparently salvation and damnation needed to be equally accessible. Victor Hale met her at the station. He wasn't what she expected. The letters he'd sent to the matrimonial agency in San Francisco had described a successful businessman seeking a refined wife to share his prosperity. The photograph showed a man in his 40s with a neat mustache and serious eyes. Distinguished, the agency woman had said. Established. What the photograph didn't show was the coldness in those eyes, the way his mouth smiled while the rest of his face stayed dead. The grip of his handshake, too tight, too long, fingers that pressed into the bones of her wrist, like he was testing whether she'd break easy. Miss Zhang. His voice was smooth as oil on water. Welcome to Oakhaven. I trust your journey was pleasant. Yes, thank you. Her English was good. Her father had insisted she learn it properly, but her accent made the words sound rounder, softer than they should be. The mountains are beautiful. They're murderous in winter. He picked up her single trunk like it weighed nothing. But you'll learn that soon enough. Come. The carriage is waiting. She followed him through the station, aware of eyes tracking her movement. A Chinese woman was rare enough in San Francisco. Out here, in this small Montana town, she might as well have been a creature from the moon. An old woman in black whispered something to her companion. 2 men outside the general store stopped their conversation to stare. A child pointed until his mother slapped his hand down. Victor's carriage was black lacquer with brass fittings, pulled by 2 horses that looked like they cost more than most people's houses. He helped her up, his hand lingering too long on her elbow, and climbed in after her. The inside smelled like leather and cigars and something else, something chemical and sweet that made her stomach turn. I should tell you, Victor said as the carriage jolted into motion, that Oakhaven is a particular kind of place. People here value tradition, order. They're not accustomed to outsiders. I understand. Do you? He leaned back, studying her like she was a horse he'd purchased sight unseen and was now inspecting for defects. We'll be married on Saturday, 4 days. That should give you time to settle in, learn the household routine. I have certain expectations about how my home should be run. Something in his tone made her hands go cold. Of course. I'm happy to. I don't need you to be happy. The smile never left his face. I need you to be obedient, useful, quiet. Can you do that, Miss Zhang? The bird of hope in her chest fluttered weakly. Yes, she heard herself say. The mansion stood at the end of Oak Street, separated from the rest of the town by a wall of manicured trees and an iron gate. It was 3 stories of white stone and dark wood, with windows that reflected the mountains like empty eyes. Beautiful and cold. A housekeeper met them at the door, Mrs. Brennan, a dried-up stick of a woman with a mouth like a knife wound. She looked Mei-Lin up and down with the kind of expression usually reserved for something you'd scrape off your shoe. This is her? This is Miss Zhang, Victor said. She'll be Mrs. Hale by week's end. Show her to the blue room. Make sure she understands the rules. Mrs. Brennan's smile was worse than her frown. Oh, I'll make sure. The blue room was on the third floor, small and cold despite the fireplace. The bed was narrow. The window looked out over the back garden where nothing grew except bare earth and the skeletal remains of last summer's roses. Mrs. Brennan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Breakfast is at 6. You'll help with preparation. Lunch at noon. Dinner at 7 sharp. Mr. Hale expects the house kept spotless. You'll address him as Sir or Mr. Hale, never by his first name. Guests are to be served but not spoken to unless directly addressed. You're not to leave the property without permission. You're not to receive mail or visitors without his approval. You're not to enter his study or his bedroom unless summoned. Do you understand?" Mei Lin's throat felt tight. "I thought, I'm to be his wife. You're to be whatever he decides you are." Mrs. Brennan's eyes glittered. "And if you're smart, you'll figure out quick that making him happy is the only thing that matters. The last girl who thought she had rights ended up in a pine box." "The last? 6 feet under in the town cemetery. Fell down the stairs," they said. "Tragic accident." Mrs. Brennan stepped closer, close enough that Mei Lin could smell the coffee on her breath. "But stairs don't usually leave handprints on a person's throat. You understand me, girl?" Mei Lin understood. She understood she'd made a terrible mistake. She understood she was trapped 1,000 miles from anyone who knew her name. She understood that the man downstairs had no intention of treating her like a wife. And she understood, with a clarity that made her knees weak, that no one in this town would help her. The wedding happened on schedule. 4 days later, in the Presbyterian church with the crooked steeple, witnessed by 50 of Oak Haven's finest citizens, Mei Lin wore a white dress that Mrs. Brennan had dug out of a trunk in the attic. It smelled like mothballs and fear. Victor wore a black suit and a smile that never reached his eyes. The Reverend spoke about duty and obedience and the sacred bond of matrimony. No one mentioned love. When Victor kissed her, his lips were cold and tasted like ashes. The congregation applauded politely. Mrs. Brennan dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, though Mei Lin saw no actual tears. At the reception in Victor's mansion, she stood beside him while people congratulated him on his exotic acquisition. That's what they called her. An acquisition, like a painting or a racehorse or a particularly nice set of china. "She's very small," one woman said, as if Mei Lin wasn't standing right there. "They all are," another replied. "I hear they eat nothing but rice. No wonder they're built like children." Victor's hand tightened on Mei Lin's waist, fingers digging into her ribs, warning her to stay silent, to smile, to play the part he'd bought her for. She smiled until her face hurt. That night she learned what Victor Hale really wanted from a wife. It wasn't companionship. It wasn't love. It wasn't even children. What Victor wanted was something to own completely, something he could break and reshape and break again. Something that couldn't fight back, couldn't escape, couldn't do anything but endure. He was very good at breaking things. The bruises started that first night. He was careful. Nothing that would show in public, nothing that couldn't be hidden under long sleeves and high collars. But they bloomed across her ribs, her back, her thighs, purple and yellow and black. A map of his ownership written on her skin. She tried to leave once, in those early weeks. Made it as far as the train station before Sheriff Garrett found her. He was a big man with a face like a disappointed bulldog, and a badge that caught the light like a warning. "Mrs. Hale," he said, not unkindly, "I think maybe you're confused, lost perhaps. Let me give you a ride home." "I'm not confused. I want to leave." "Can't let you do that, ma'am. Your husband's worried sick. Come on now, don't make this difficult." She ran, got maybe 20 feet before he caught her, hands like iron on her arms, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. She screamed. People on the street turned to look, then turned away. Their eyes slid past her like she was invisible. Sheriff Garrett carried her to his wagon and drove her back to the mansion. Victor met them at the door. "Thank you, Sheriff. I don't know what got into her. Female hysteria, I suppose. I'll make sure the doctor examines her." "No trouble at all, Mr. Hale. Happy to help." The sheriff left. Victor closed the door, and then he showed Mei Lin what happened to wives who tried to leave. She didn't try again. The days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. She learned the rhythm of survival. Learned to read Victor's moods in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. learned which silences were safe and which ones meant violence was coming, learned to make herself small and quiet and forgettable. She became a ghost in the house that was supposed to be her home. Mrs. Brennan taught her nothing but contempt. The woman took pleasure in Mei Lin's humiliation, in watching her scrub floors and empty chamber pots and serve meals to Victor's guests while they made jokes about Orientals and laundries and opium dens. "That's all your kind is good for," one of Victor's banker friends said during a dinner party. "Laundry and railroad work. Although I must say, Hale, you've found a prettier use for this one." Victor laughed. Mei Lin kept her eyes on her feet and poured more wine. Sometimes she thought about killing him. Late at night, when Victor was passed out drunk and snoring like a saw through wood, she'd lie awake and imagine it. A knife. Poison. Pushing him down the stairs like he'd done to the wife before her. She'd plan it in elaborate detail, every step, every contingency. But she never did it, because she knew what happened to Chinese women who killed white men in Montana Territory. She'd heard the stories, the trials that weren't really trials, the ropes that didn't care about self-defense or justification. So she endured. She endured Victor's rages and his coldness, and the nights when he'd come home drunk and mean, looking for something to break. She endured the town's contempt, the way shopkeepers would serve her last, if at all. The way children threw stones and called her names their parents taught them. The way the church congregation would shift away from her on the rare Sundays Victor made her attend services, like being Chinese was catching. She endured Mrs. Brennan's constant criticism. The housekeeper found fault with everything. The way Mei Lin made the bed, folded the linens, polished the silver, swept the floors. Nothing was ever good enough. Every mistake earned a slap or a pinch or a night without dinner. She endured it all because enduring was all she had left. Until the winter of 1887, when the first snow came early and heavy and everything changed. November rolled in cold and mean. The mountains disappeared behind walls of white. The wind came down from the peaks like something with teeth, tearing at the town, ripping shingles off roofs, turning the streets into rivers of ice. Victor's mood darkened with the weather. His bank was struggling. Mei Lin heard him shouting about it with his partners, something about bad investments and loans that wouldn't be repaid. He drank more, slept less. The violence that had always simmered in him started to boil over. One night he came home and found her reading. She'd discovered the book in his study, a collection of poems by someone named Dickinson. She'd been careful to put it back exactly where she found it, but tonight she'd been careless. Left it on her bedside table. He picked it up, thumbed through it, looked at her with something like amusement. "You think you're educated," he said. "You think you're better than what you are." "No, sir, I just—" The book hit her in the face, corner first, sharp enough to split her lip. "You're a servant, a possession. You don't get to read poetry, you don't get to have thoughts. You exist to serve me, and that's all you exist for." He beat her methodically, the way you'd beat a dog that pissed on the carpet. Not in anger. Anger would have been better. He did it cold, calculated, each blow placed precisely where it would hurt most but show least. When he was done, he left her on the floor and went to bed. She lay there until the sun came up, tasting blood, counting her ribs to see if any were broken. That was when something changed inside her. Not hope. Hope was long dead, but something harder, colder, hate, pure, clean, focused hate that burned like a coal in her chest. She'd spent 3 years trying to survive, trying to be small enough, quiet enough, obedient enough that he'd lose interest, that he'd get tired of breaking her. But men like Victor Hale never got tired of breaking things, so she stopped trying to survive and started waiting for her chance. December brought the worst blizzard anyone in Oakhaven could remember. Snow fell for 3 days straight, piling up against buildings, burying fences, turning the world into nothing but white and cold. The wind screamed like something dying. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the pipes and fires barely kept the cold at bay. The town shut down. No one moved. No one traveled. Everyone huddled inside and waited for it to pass. Victor had been drinking steadily for 2 days. The whiskey made him philosophical at first. He'd talk about his childhood, his father, the empire he planned to build. But philosophy always curdled into rage eventually. He'd start listing Mei Lin's failures, her inadequacies, all the ways she disappointed him. You can't even give me a son, he said on the third night of the storm, drunk enough to slur but not enough to pass out. 3 years, and your womb is as useless as the rest of you. Mei Lin kept her eyes down, folding the same napkin over and over. I'm sorry. Sorry. He laughed, ugly and sharp. You're sorry. You know what I paid for you? $800 to that agency. $800 for damaged goods. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. Look at me when I'm talking to you. She looked up. His face was red from whiskey and firelight, eyes glassy, mouth twisted. He looked like something that used to be human. You know what you are? He stood up, swaying slightly. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. You're a mistake I made when I was lonely and stupid, and I've regretted it every single day since. The coal of hate in her chest burned hotter. Yes, sir. Don't yes, sir, me, you useless bitch. He crossed the room faster than she expected, grabbed her by the hair, yanked her head back. I should have drowned you the day you arrived. Should have saved myself 3 years of looking at your pathetic face. His breath was hot and sour. His fingers twisted in her hair hard enough to make her scalp scream. And something in Mei Lin just stopped. Stopped being afraid. Stopped caring what he'd do. Stopped being the thing he'd spent 3 years trying to turn her into. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, Then do it. His hand went still. What did you say? I said do it. Her voice was steady, calm. Kill me. You want to. You've wanted to since the day we met, so stop talking about it and do it. For a moment, she thought he actually would. Thought he'd snap her neck right there in the parlor, and that would be the end of it. But then he smiled. It was the worst smile she'd ever seen. You think you get to decide when this ends? He shoved her away, hard enough that she stumbled into the wall. You think you get a say in anything? He crossed to the door, grabbed his coat. I'm going to the stable. When I come back, I'm going to drag you out into that storm and leave you there. Let you freeze to death slow. Let you think about every mistake you ever made while the cold takes you piece by piece. And no one, not the sheriff, not the reverend, not anyone in this goddamn town, will say a word about it. Because you're nothing, Mei Lin. You're less than nothing. He slammed the door behind him. Mei Lin stood in the silence he left behind. The fire crackled, the wind howled, snow battered the windows like it was trying to get in. She should have been terrified. She should have been planning her escape, her defense, her survival. Instead, she walked calmly to the kitchen, picked up the largest knife she could find, and waited. If Victor wanted to kill her, he'd have to do it properly. And if he hesitated, if he gave her even a second's chance, she'd bury that knife in his throat and watch him bleed out on the expensive carpet he loved so much. She was done being afraid, done being small, done being the thing he'd tried to make her. The door slammed open 15 minutes later. But it wasn't Victor who stumbled through. It was a stranger, tall and broad-shouldered, covered in snow, face hidden behind a frost-covered scarf. He stumbled 2 steps into the parlor and collapsed, hitting the floor hard enough to rattle the windows. Mei Lin stood frozen, knife in hand, staring at this man who'd just crashed into her nightmare. He lifted his head, pulled down the scarf. His face was weathered and hard, carved by wind and sun into something rough and honest, dark hair plastered to his forehead with melted snow. Eyes like winter sky, pale blue and sharp, and completely exhausted. Help, he managed. Please. And then he passed out. Mei Lin stood there, knife still in her hand, and thought, this is how things change. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once when you're least ready for it. The stranger bleeding on Victor Hale's expensive carpet was either her salvation or her doom. She had maybe 10 minutes to decide which. Outside, through the screaming wind and the battering snow, she heard Victor's footsteps crunching across the frozen ground. Coming back. Coming to drag her into the storm and leave her to die. The stranger groaned, barely conscious. Victor's hand hit the door, and Mei Lin Zhang, who'd spent 3 years being nothing, made a choice. She dropped the knife, grabbed the stranger under the arms, and dragged him toward the back stairs with strength she didn't know she had. The door opened. Victor's voice cut through the wind. Where are you, you little bitch? Mei Lin pulled harder. The stranger's weight was immense, all muscle and bone and wet leather, but fear made her strong. She got him up 3 steps, 4, 5, into the hallway, into the spare room at the end. Victor's footsteps echoed in the parlor below. She shoved the stranger onto the bed, grabbed a blanket, threw it over him. Her heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Her hands shook. This was insane. This was suicide. Victor would find him, and then… Mei Lin! Victor's voice was closer now, on the stairs. She slipped out of the room, closed the door silent as prayer, and moved down the hallway on feet that barely touched the floor. Met Victor at the top of the stairs. He stopped, swaying. "What are you doing up here?" "I heard something, a noise. I came to check." He studied her, suspicious and drunk and mean. "What kind of noise?" "The wind. A shudder, maybe. It's nothing." For a long moment he just stared at her. Then he grabbed her throat, slammed her against the wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. "I told you what I'm going to do to you," he whispered, breath hot and sour on her face. "Are you ready to die, Mei Lin? Are you ready to freeze?" She looked him dead in the eyes. "Do your worst." Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, or rage that she wasn't begging. He squeezed harder. The world started to go gray at the edges, and then, from somewhere far away, she heard a sound. A door opening. Footsteps. Victor heard it too. His hand loosened slightly. "What the hell?" The stranger appeared at the end of the hallway. He wasn't tall so much as he was solid, 6 feet of hard muscle and harder will, wrapped in wet leather and determination. He moved like someone who'd spent his life riding and fighting and not backing down from anything. His voice was rough from cold and exhaustion, but it cut through the space between them like a blade. "Get your hands off her." Victor's grip tightened. "Who the hell are you? This is my house. That's my wife. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." The stranger took a step closer. "I said, get your hands off her. I'll do whatever I want with what's mine." "She's not a thing, and you're done touching her." Victor laughed. "You must be stupid or lost or both. Do you have any idea who I am? I own this town. I own the sheriff. I own everything and everyone in it, including her. So whatever white knight fantasy you've got going, you can forget it. Get out. Now." The stranger didn't move. "No." One word, simple, final. Victor's face went purple. "I'll kill you." "You're welcome to try." And just like that, the world tilted. Victor let go of Mei Lin's throat and turned to face this man who'd walked into his house and refused to back down. Mei Lin collapsed against the wall, gasping, watching. The two men faced each other in the narrow hallway while the blizzard screamed outside and the future hung in the balance. Victor moved first. He always moved first. That was his way. Hit hard, hit fast, use money and power and rage to crush anything that challenged him. He lunged, fist aimed at the stranger's face. The stranger sidestepped like he had all the time in the world, caught Victor's wrist, twisted. There was a crack. Victor screamed. The stranger shoved him away, not hard, just firm. Victor hit the wall and slid down, cradling his wrist, eyes wide with shock and pain, and something he'd probably never felt before. Fear. "You broke my wrist. You broke my goddamn wrist." The stranger looked down at him without expression. "That's the least of what I'll break if you touch her again." He turned to Mei Lin, and his eyes, those winter sky eyes, softened. "Ma'am? Are you hurt?" She tried to answer, but no sound came out. Her throat was too raw, her brain too shocked. Everything she'd endured, all the violence she'd survived, and this stranger had ended it in 10 seconds. "I'll take that as yes." He glanced at Victor, then back to her. "Get your things. Whatever you need. We're leaving." "You can't," Victor started. "We're leaving," the stranger repeated, voice flat as stone. "And you're going to let us. Because if you don't, I'll finish what I started. Understand?" Victor understood. Mei Lin could see it in his face. The understanding that money and power and reputation meant nothing against a man who simply didn't care about any of it. She found her voice. "My things are… now," the stranger said gently, "before the storm gets worse." She ran, grabbed her few possessions, a dress, a photograph of her parents, the book of poems Victor had hit her with, shoved them in a bag with shaking hands while her brain tried to process what was happening. She was leaving. After 3 years of imprisonment, of torture, of enduring. She was leaving, When she came back down, the stranger was still standing over Victor, who'd managed to stand but was cradling his wrist and looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "This isn't over," Victor hissed. "I'll have the sheriff." "You'll do nothing," the stranger said, "because if I hear you've come after her, if I hear you've even said her name, I'll come back, and next time I won't stop at your wrist. We clear?" Victor said nothing. The stranger turned to Mei Lin. "Ready?" She nodded. They walked down the stairs together, through the parlor where she'd been beaten too many times to count, through the foyer where she'd been a prisoner for 1,000 days. The stranger opened the door. The blizzard hit them like a wall. Snow and wind and cold so intense it stole her breath. The world was nothing but white chaos, impossible to see through, impossible to navigate. The stranger pulled his scarf up, grabbed her hand. "Stay close. Don't let go." She held on like her life depended on it, because it did. They stepped out into the storm together, leaving Victor Hale in his mansion and 3 years of hell behind. Mei Lin didn't look back, not once. The cold hit like a fist. Not gradual, not something you could ease into, just instant, vicious cold that went straight through cloth and skin and settled in your bones. Mei Lin gasped and the air burned her lungs. The wind shoved her sideways and she would have fallen if the stranger's grip hadn't tightened on her hand. "This way!" he shouted over the howl of the storm. She couldn't see anything. White, everywhere, spinning and thick, the world erased. Her feet sank into snow up to her knees. Each step was a fight. The wind screamed in her ears and tore at her coat, and she thought, "This is how I die." Not by Victor's hands, but by the mountain itself. The stranger pulled her forward, somehow finding direction in all that chaos. His hand was solid and warm, even through their gloves. He moved like he knew where he was going, like he'd walked through worse than this and lived. They stumbled through what felt like miles, but was probably only yards. Her legs burned. Her face went numb. Ice formed on her eyelashes, and she had to keep blinking it away. The stranger's shape ahead of her was barely visible, just a dark blur in all that white. Then suddenly, there was something solid in front of them. A building, barn or stable, she couldn't tell. The stranger found a door, wrenched it open, shoved her inside. The wind cut off like someone had slammed a lid on it. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the cold had been. Mei Lin collapsed against a wall, gasping, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. The stranger closed the door, and for a moment they just stood there in the dark, breathing, alive. "You all right?" His voice was rough. She tried to answer, but her jaw was locked from shivering. Managed a nod he probably couldn't see. "We can't stay here long. This is still his property. Soon as that storm breaks, he'll come looking." She heard him moving in the darkness, the rustle of hay, the creak of wood. "There's horses here. We'll take 2 and head for the mountains." "In this?" Her voice came out cracked and thin. "Storm's bad now, but it'll pass before dawn. We get up into the high country, he won't follow. Too dangerous, even for someone stupid enough to try." A match flared. The stranger's face appeared in the small circle of light, all hard angles and frost-burned skin. He lit a lantern hanging from a post, and the barn materialized around them. 4 horses in stalls, tack hanging on the walls, hay bales stacked in the corner. The stranger moved to the nearest horse, started saddling it with practiced efficiency. His movements were quick and sure despite the cold. Mei Lin watched him and thought about the fact that she didn't even know his name. "Who are you?" she asked. He glanced at her, then back to the saddle he was cinching. "Caleb Rourke. Was riding down from the high country when the storm hit. Saw your house, figured I could wait it out there. Didn't expect to find—" He paused. "What I found. Thank you." The words felt impossibly small for what he'd done. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long night ahead." He finished with the first horse and moved to the second. "You know how to ride?" "No." He stopped, looked at her. "Never?" "I'm from San Francisco. We had cable cars." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Well, you're about to learn fast. Come here." She moved closer on legs that didn't want to work right. He handed her a blanket from a pile in the corner. "Wrap that around yourself, over your coat. We need every layer we can get." She did as he said. The blanket smelled like horse and hay and dust, but it was thick and it helped. While she wrapped herself, Caleb finished saddling the second horse, then pulled down 2 more blankets and tied them behind the saddles. There's a line shack about 8 miles up the mountain, he said, more to himself than to her. If we can make it there before the storm gets worse, we'll have shelter, fire, chance to figure out what's next. What's a line shack? Small cabin. Ranchers use them during summer grazing season. Should be stocked with basic supplies. He checked the saddle one more time, then turned to her. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be rough. Cold like you've never felt. Dangerous. But it's the only chance we've got. You understand? She understood that 8 miles might as well be 800. That she'd never ridden a horse, never spent a night in the wilderness, never done anything harder than survive Victor Hale's rage. That she was completely unprepared for this. But she also understood that going back wasn't an option. I understand. Good. He led one of the horses to her. This is Meg. She's steady, won't spook easy. I'll put you up first, then hand you the reins. He lifted her into the saddle like she weighed nothing. The horse shifted under her and her stomach dropped. She was so high up, and the saddle felt wrong, like she might slide right off. Sit up straight, hold the reins loose. She'll follow my horse. You just need to stay on. Can you do that? I don't know. Well, you're gonna find out. He swung up onto his own horse with an ease that made it look simple. Took the lead rope of a third horse, a big roan gelding that stamped and snorted. This one's coming too. Victor owes you at least 3 horses for what he's done. He guided his horse to the barn door, looked back at her. Ready? She wasn't, would never be. But she nodded anyway. Caleb opened the door and the storm roared back in. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of white and cold and terror. Maylin clung to the saddle horn with both hands while Meg plodded steadily through snow that got deeper with every step. The wind tried to tear her off the horse. Ice formed on her scarf, her coat, her hair. She couldn't feel her feet or hands. Couldn't see anything but Caleb's back ahead of her, a dark shape in the swirling white. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the next moment, the next breath, the next step of the horse beneath her. Her thighs screamed from gripping the saddle. Her back ached. She was so cold she stopped shivering, which some part of her brain knew was bad, but she couldn't remember why. Caleb looked back every few minutes, checking she was still there. Once he rode back beside her, pulled her scarf up higher over her face. Stay with me, he said. We're almost there. She didn't believe him. Almost there was something people said when they were lying, but she nodded and held on and kept breathing. And then, like a miracle she didn't deserve, there was a shape in the snow ahead, a small dark square against all that white. The line shack. Caleb dismounted and came back to help her down. When her feet hit the ground, her legs buckled. He caught her, half-carried her to the door while the horses stamped and snorted behind them. The cabin was one room, maybe 12 feet square. A stone fireplace against one wall, a narrow bed, a table, 2 chairs, shelves with supplies. It smelled like old smoke and pine and emptiness. Caleb set her in one of the chairs and went back out for the horses. Maylin sat and stared at nothing, too cold and exhausted to think. Heard him moving around outside, the soft sounds of horses being unsaddled and secured in what must be a lean-to she hadn't seen. Then he was back, arms full of saddlebags and blankets, kicking the door shut behind him. He dropped everything and went straight to the fireplace. There was wood stacked beside it, kindling. Within minutes, he had a fire going, small at first, then growing. The heat was almost painful. Maylin's hands started to tingle as feeling came back, then burn. She made a sound she didn't mean to make. That's good, Caleb said, not looking up from the fire. Means you're not frostbit. Hurts worse when you're damaged. He built the fire up until it was roaring, then came over and started unlacing her boots. I can... She started. You can't. Your hands don't work right yet. Let me. He was right. Her fingers were clumsy, useless. She let him pull off her boots, peel away her wet socks. Her feet were white and waxy looking. He wrapped them in a dry blanket, then did the same for her hands. We need to get you out of those wet clothes, he said. She must have made a face because he held up his hands. I'll turn around. There's a dry shirt and pants in my saddlebag. They'll be too big, but they're warm. Change quick, then get under those blankets on the bed. He turned his back. Maylin stood on shaking legs and somehow got her wet clothes off, pulled on his shirt and pants. They were huge on her. The pants had to be rolled up 3 times, but they were dry and they were warm, and that was all that mattered. Done, she said. Get in the bed. I'll make something hot to drink. She crawled under the pile of blankets and watched him move around the small cabin. He was efficient, economical, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Found a pot, filled it with snow from outside, set it over the fire to melt. Added coffee from a tin on the shelf, let it boil. The smell filled the cabin, strong and bitter and real. He poured 2 cups, brought one to her. Careful, it's hot. She took it in both hands, let the warmth seep into her palms. Sipped. The coffee was terrible, thick and bitter, and probably strong enough to strip paint, but it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Caleb sat in the other chair, hands wrapped around his own cup, staring into the fire. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, the fire crackled and the coffee steamed, and 2 strangers sat in the warmth and tried to understand what had just happened. Finally, Maylin said, "Why did you help me?" He looked at her. "Why wouldn't I? Everyone else did nothing for 3 years. They saw, they knew, and they did nothing. Then everyone else should be ashamed of themselves." He took a drink of coffee. "I was raised to believe that when you see someone being hurt, you help them. Doesn't matter who they are or what they look like or where they came from. You help. That's it. Most people don't believe that. Most people are cowards." She almost smiled. "You broke his wrist." "I should have broken more than that." His voice was flat. "Man who puts his hands on a woman like that doesn't deserve to keep them. He'll come after us. Let him try. You don't understand. He owns the sheriff. He owns the town. He'll say I stole from him, that I'm his property, that you kidnapped me. They'll believe him. I don't care what they believe. He'll kill you." Caleb looked at her with those winter sky eyes, and she saw something in them that made her shiver. Not fear, something colder. "He can try," he said quietly. "Won't be the first man who did." The way he said it made her think he wasn't exaggerating. She studied him across the firelight. He was maybe 35, maybe 40, hard to tell. His face was weathered but not old. His hands were scarred and calloused. He moved like someone who'd spent his life fighting, not in saloons but in the real world, where fighting meant survival. "What were you doing up in the high country?" she asked. "Trapping, hunting, living." He shrugged. "I've got a cabin up there. More remote than this. Spend most of the year alone." "By choice?" "By preference. People are mostly trouble." "But you helped me. Like I said, you were being hurt." He set down his coffee cup, stood up, went to the saddlebags. "You should eat something. We've got a long day tomorrow." "Where are we going?" "My cabin. It's another day's ride north and higher up. But it's safe. Isolated. Victor Hale could bring an army, and they wouldn't find it if I didn't want them to." He pulled out some kind of dried meat and hard bread, brought it to her. The food was tough and bland, but she ate it because her body needed fuel. Caleb ate standing up, staring out the small window at the storm. "Will it stop?" she asked. "The storm. By morning. Snow will be deep, but we can move. Need to leave early before anyone comes looking." "You think he'll come tonight?" "No, he's not stupid enough to go out in this, and he can't force his men to do it either. But come first light, he'll gather whoever he can buy or bully, and they'll start searching." He turned to look at her. "That's why we need to be gone." Maylin pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "I've never even seen the mountains. Not up close. And now I'm going to live in them." "You'll learn, or you'll die." He said it matter of fact, not cruel. "That's how it works up there. The mountain doesn't care who you are or what you've been through. It'll kill you if you're weak or stupid or unlucky. So you get strong, you get smart, and you make your own luck." "I don't know how to do any of that." "Then I'll teach you." "Why?" He looked at her like it was a strange question. "Because you need to learn, and because—" He paused. "Because I don't like seeing people get crushed, and you've been crushed enough." Something in her chest loosened. Not hope. She'd learned better than hope, but something close to it. "What if I can't learn? What if I'm not strong enough?" "You walked away from him. You're stronger than you think." "I didn't walk. You carried me. You made the choice to leave. That's the hard part. Everything else is just work." He moved back to the fire, added more wood. The flames jumped higher, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind howled and the snow kept falling, and somewhere in the valley below, Victor Hale was probably raging and planning and swearing revenge. But up here, in this small cabin with a stranger who'd risked everything to help her, Mei Lin felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Safe. It wouldn't last. She knew that. Victor wouldn't give up. The law was on his side. The town was on his side. Everything was on his side. But for tonight, she was safe. And that was enough. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes again, the fire had burned down to coals and gray light was seeping through the window. Caleb was already up, dressed, packing the saddlebags with quick, efficient movements. "Storm stopped," he said without turning around. "We need to move." Mei Lin sat up. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her thighs were bruised from gripping the horse. Her hands were stiff. Her feet ached. "I hurt everywhere," she said. "You'll hurt worse after today's ride, but you'll survive it." He tossed her the dried clothes from yesterday. "Get dressed. We leave in 10 minutes." There was no privacy, no time for modesty. She changed with her back to him while he finished packing. The clothes were still slightly damp and cold, but they were hers. Caleb handed her a piece of hard bread and a strip of dried meat. "Eat while we ride. We're not stopping until we're clear of the valley." They stepped outside into a world transformed. The storm had buried everything under 3 feet of fresh snow. The sky was pale gray, the sun a dim glow behind clouds. The cold was sharp but not vicious. Maybe 20 degrees, she guessed. Bearable. The horses were in a small lean-to, already saddled. Caleb must have been up for hours. He lifted her onto Meg without asking if she needed help, then swung up onto his own horse. "Stay close. Watch for trees with low branches. They'll be heavy with snow. And if I tell you to stop, you stop immediately. Understand?" She understood. They rode out into the white silence of morning. The cabin disappeared behind them within minutes, swallowed by trees and snow. Caleb led, breaking trail, the third horse following on a lead rope. Mei Lin followed, her body protesting every step Meg took. The pain from yesterday came back almost immediately. Her thighs burned, her back ached, but she gritted her teeth and held on and didn't complain. The landscape was brutal and beautiful. Pine trees bent under the weight of snow. Cliffs rose to their left, sheer and dark. To their right, the ground fell away into whiteness, a valley or canyon, she couldn't tell. The only sounds were the crunch of the horse's hooves and the occasional crack of a branch giving up under its burden of snow. They climbed steadily. The air got thinner, colder. Mei Lin's lungs burned, but she kept breathing, kept moving. After what felt like hours, Caleb stopped and looked back at her. "You doing all right?" Define all right. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "You're still on the horse. That's all right." They kept climbing. The sun climbed with them, turning the snow from gray to white to almost blinding. Mei Lin's eyes watered. She pulled her scarf up over her face and squinted against the glare. Around midday, Caleb stopped again. They were on a small plateau, sheltered by rocks on 3 sides. He dismounted and came back to help her down. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground. He caught her, held her steady until she could stand. "We'll rest here. Let the horses breathe." He pulled out the bread and dried meat, handed her some. They ate standing up, the horses nosing at the snow looking for grass underneath. The silence was enormous. No wind, no birds, no sounds except their breathing and the horses. "How much farther?" Mei Lin asked. "Few more hours. Maybe 4. Depends on the snow." He was studying the horizon, eyes narrowed. "We need to keep moving. I don't like how exposed we are." "You think they're following?" "I think Victor Hale doesn't strike me as someone who lets things go, and I think we shouldn't take chances." They mounted up again. The climb got steeper. Twice they had to dismount and lead the horses around deadfalls buried under snow. Once, Meg stumbled and Mei Lin nearly went over her head, only Caleb's quick grab of the bridle keeping them both upright. "You're doing good," he said. She didn't feel like she was doing good. She felt like she was dying by inches. But she nodded and climbed back on and kept going. The sun was starting to drop toward the horizon when they finally crested a ridge and Caleb pointed ahead. "There." She looked. At first she saw nothing but more trees, more snow, more mountains. Then she spotted it, a small cabin tucked into the side of the slope, almost invisible against the landscape, smoke rising from a chimney. "Someone's there," she said. "That's me." Left a fire banked before I headed down. Should still be going. The cabin was smaller than the line shack, but it looked solid. Built from logs that had weathered to silver gray, with a roof that looked newer than the rest. A small corral out back, empty now. A creek running past it, frozen solid. Caleb dismounted and helped her down. This time her legs didn't buckle, but it was close. "Welcome home," he said. Home. The word felt strange. She'd lived in Victor's mansion for 3 years, and it had never been home. This tiny cabin in the middle of nowhere, owned by a man she'd known for less than a day, shouldn't feel like home either. But something in her chest eased when she looked at it. Inside was warmer than she expected. The banked fire was still alive, just barely. Caleb fed it fresh wood, and it flared up, hungry. The cabin was one room like the line shack, but better kept. A real bed in one corner. A table and chairs, shelves with supplies, canned goods, dried food, ammunition, a rack with rifles, furs on the floor, blankets folded neat. "Sit," Caleb said. "I'll tend the horses." She sat and watched through the window as he led all 3 horses to the corral, unsaddled them, brushed them down. Watched him move through the routine with the same efficiency he'd shown since the moment he'd walked into her life. When he came back in, he was carrying more wood for the fire and 2 dead rabbits. "Caught these in the traps on the way up. You ever clean a rabbit?" "No?" "Then watch. You'll be doing it yourself next time." He took the rabbits outside, came back 10 minutes later with them skinned and gutted, set them to roast over the fire on a makeshift spit. The smell of cooking meat filled the cabin, and Mei Lin's stomach cramped with hunger. While the rabbits cooked, Caleb showed her around. Showed her where he kept the food, the ammunition, the medical supplies. Showed her how to work the stove, how to bank the fire at night, how to pump water from the well outside. "You need to learn all this," he said. "Need to be able to survive up here on your own." "Why would I be on my own?" "I go out hunting sometimes, trapping, can be gone for days. You need to be able to take care of yourself." "I don't know if I can." He looked at her straight. "You can. You just don't know it yet." They ate the rabbit with their hands, the meat falling off the bone, hot and greasy and perfect. Mei Lin couldn't remember food ever tasting this good. After they'd eaten, Caleb made coffee and they sat by the fire, and for the first time since they'd met, the silence felt comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Mei Lin said finally. "Go ahead." "Why do you live up here? Alone?" He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky. "I was married once," he said finally. "Long time ago. She died. Fever took her and our baby both. After that, I couldn't..." He stopped. "Couldn't be around people, couldn't stand the noise, the closeness, so I came up here. Been here ever since." "How long?" 7 years. 7 years alone in the mountains. She tried to imagine it and couldn't. "Do you ever want to go back?" "To what? Towns full of people like Victor Hale? Sheriffs who look the other way? No, I'm done with all that." He looked at her. "You might feel different. Might get tired of the isolation. If you do, I'll take you down to Helena or Butte, somewhere you can start over proper. But you need to heal first. Need to get strong. That'll take time." "How much time?" "As long as it takes." She wanted to ask what happened after. What happened when she was healed and strong and ready to face the world again? But she was afraid of the answer, so she said nothing. That night, Caleb gave her the bed and made himself a pallet on the floor by the fire. She protested, but he waved her off. "You need real rest. I've slept on worse." She lay under the blankets and listened to him settle down. The sounds of him breathing, the fire crackling. Outside, the night was silent and dark and vast. She should have been terrified. Alone in the wilderness with a stranger, hunted by a powerful man who wanted her dead. But instead she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. She fell asleep to the sound of Caleb's breathing and the fire's warmth and didn't dream at all. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Caleb was up before dawn every day, starting the fire, making coffee, checking his traps. Mei Lin learned to wake with him, to help with the morning routine. He taught her how to make proper coffee, how to cook over an open fire, how to keep the cabin warm without wasting wood. He taught her to ride properly. Not the desperate clinging she'd done on that first night, but real riding. How to sit balanced, how to guide the horse with her legs and hands, how to read the animal's mood. She fell off twice the first week, landed hard in the snow both times, got back on because Caleb was watching, and she refused to quit in front of him. He taught her to shoot. Started with a small rifle, lighter than the others. Showed her how to hold it, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. She missed the first dozen shots, hit the tree trunk on the 13th. By the end of the month, she could hit a pine cone at 50 yards. He taught her to track, how to read snow for animal signs, how to tell fresh prints from old, how to move quiet through the forest. She was clumsy at first, breaking every branch, scaring off anything within a mile. But slowly, painfully, she learned. And she learned about Caleb. Not from him talking, he wasn't much for words, but from watching. The way he moved through the world with absolute confidence but no arrogance. The way he never wasted anything, used every part of every animal he killed. The way he was gentle with the horses but hard with himself. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to figure something out. They didn't talk much about Victor or what had happened. It sat between them like a third presence, acknowledged but not discussed. Until one night, about 3 weeks in, when they were sitting by the fire after dinner. "You think he's still looking?" Maylin asked. Caleb was cleaning one of his rifles, methodical, thorough. "Yeah." "How do you know?" "Because men like him don't let go. He'll take it personal that you left, that I helped you. He'll keep looking until he finds us, or until something else distracts him." "What if he finds us?" Caleb looked up from the rifle. His eyes were cold and clear. "Then I'll handle it." "You can't kill everyone he sends." "Watch me." He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that she believed him. But that scared her too. "I don't want you to die because of me." "Won't be because of you. Will be because he's a bastard who can't let things be." He went back to cleaning the rifle. "Besides, I'm hard to kill. Been tried before." "What happened?" "To the people who tried?" Something dark flickered across his face. "They're not around anymore." She let it drop. February came cold and mean. The temperature dropped so low that Maylin's breath froze in her lungs. The cabin's walls creaked at night. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. Caleb taught her how to layer clothes, how to keep her extremities warm, how to recognize the early signs of frostbite. One morning she woke to find him gone. No note, no explanation, just his tracks leading north into the forest. Panic hit her first, then anger, then determination. She built up the fire, made coffee, checked on the horses, did all the morning chores he'd taught her, waited. He came back 3 days later with 2 deer and a wolverine pelt. "Where were you?" she demanded. "Hunting." "You could have told me." "Didn't plan on being gone that long. Tracks led farther than I thought." He dropped the deer by the door, hung the pelt to dry. "You do all right?" "I survived." He looked at her and nodded, and she realized it had been a test, one she'd passed. After that, he left her alone more often. Never more than a few days, but enough that she had to rely on herself. Had to make decisions, solve problems, survive. She hated it at first, then she started to understand. He was teaching her to not need him. March brought the first hints of spring. The snow started to melt in patches. The creek thawed. The days got longer. Maylin could feel the difference in her body. She was stronger now, leaner, her muscles hard from constant work. Her hands were calloused. Her face was weathered. She looked in the small mirror Caleb had and barely recognized herself. The frightened woman who'd cowered in Victor Hale's mansion was gone. Someone else had taken her place. Someone harder, steadier, less afraid. One afternoon in late March, she was outside splitting wood when she heard horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. Her heart stopped. She dropped the axe and ran for the cabin. Caleb was inside, cleaning traps. He looked up as she burst through the door. "Riders!" she gasped. "Coming fast!" His face went cold and hard. He moved to the window, looked out. "How many?" "I don't know, 3? 4? He grabbed 2 rifles from the rack, handed her one. "You remember what I taught you?" She nodded, mouth dry. "Good. Get upstairs to the loft. You'll have a better angle. Don't shoot unless I shoot first. If I go down, you empty that rifle into whoever's left, and then you run. Take Meg and ride for the line shack. There's supplies there, maps, money hidden under the floorboards. You understand?" "Caleb, do you understand?" "Yes." Then move. She climbed to the loft, positioned herself by the small window. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still. Below, Caleb stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. 3 riders came into view. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, maybe 50 yards out. Even from this distance, Mei Lin recognized the man in front. Victor Hale sat his horse like he owned the world, his broken wrists splinted and bandaged. On either side of him rode 2 men she didn't recognize. Big men with guns and mean faces. "Rourke," Victor called out. "I've come for what's mine." Caleb's voice carried across the clearing, flat and dangerous. "Nothing of yours here." "My wife would disagree." "She's not your wife anymore. She's free, and she's staying that way." Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Free? She's Chinese. She's property. The law's on my side, boy. Sheriff's got a warrant for her arrest, theft, running out on a legal marriage. And one for you, too. Kidnapping. Warrants don't mean much up here." "Then I guess we'll have to settle this another way." One of the men with Victor started to dismount. Caleb's rifle came up smooth and fast. "Stay on that horse unless you want to die on it." The man froze. Victor's face went red. "You can't fight all of us." "Don't have to fight all of you, just have to kill you. Rest will leave on their own." "Big talk for one man." "Not just one man." Mei Lin's voice rang out from the loft window, steady and clear. She had the rifle aimed at Victor's chest. 2. Victor looked up, saw her there. His expression twisted into something between rage and disbelief. "You ungrateful little bitch! After everything I did for you, you did nothing for me. You tortured me, beat me, made me a prisoner. That's done now. Come down here, now, or I'll burn this cabin to the ground with both of you in it." Caleb laughed, cold and hard. "Try it, but you'll be dead before the first match strikes." For a long moment, nobody moved. 3 men facing a cabin, 2 people inside with rifles, and the mountains watching, waiting to see who would break first. Victor broke. "This isn't over," he said. "I'll come back. I'll bring the army if I have to. You can't hide up here forever." "Long enough." Victor wheeled his horse around. The 2 men followed. They rode back the way they'd come, and within minutes they were gone, swallowed by the trees. Mei Lin climbed down from the loft, her whole body shaking now that it was over. Caleb caught her as her knees gave out. "You did good," he said quietly. "Real good." "I was terrified. Being scared and doing it anyway, that's courage. You've got more of it than you know." She looked up at him and saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Respect, pride, maybe. And something else, something that made her breath catch. "He'll come back," she said. "Yeah, but next time we'll be ready." That night, after they'd secured the cabin and checked the perimeter and made sure there were no other unwelcome visitors, they sat by the fire and didn't talk. Just sat in the warmth and the quiet and the knowledge that the war was far from over. But for now, they'd won. And Mei Lin realized something that shocked her. She wasn't the same woman who'd left Victor's mansion 4 months ago. She was something new, something stronger, something that wouldn't break. The next morning came hard and cold. Mei Lin woke to find Caleb already up, standing at the window with a rifle in his hands, watching the tree line like he expected Victor to come riding back any minute. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "Some." He didn't turn around. "Made coffee." She poured herself a cup and stood beside him. The clearing outside was empty, peaceful. Snow sparkled in the early light. Nothing moved except the wind through the pines. "You think they're still out there?" "Victor?" "No, he went back to town, but he's not done. He'll regroup, come up with a plan. Maybe bring more men next time." Caleb finally looked at her. "We need to be ready." "How do we get ready for an army?" "We don't fight an army. We make it so expensive and dangerous to come after us that it's not worth it anymore." He set the rifle down, moved to the table. "Come here. I want to show you something." He spread out a hand-drawn map of the area. His handwriting was neat, precise. Every trail marked, every landmark noted, elevation changes indicated with careful lines. "This is us." He tapped a spot high in the mountains. "This is the line shack where we stopped that first night. This is the route down to Oakhaven. Now, there's 3 other ways up here, but they're all harder, steeper, more dangerous. If Victor comes back, he'll use the main trail because his men won't want to risk the others. So we watched the main trail. We do better than watch it. We make it impossible. His finger traced the path. Here, where it narrows between these two cliffs, we can drop a tree across it, make them have to dismount, clear it, waste time and energy. Here, where the trail crosses the creek, we can sabotage the ford, make it dangerous to cross. And here, he tapped a spot about 2 miles from the cabin. Here's where we stop them if they make it past everything else. Mei Lin studied the map. You've done this before, defended a position. I was a soldier once, before I came up here. Fought in the Indian War at E. His voice went flat. Learned a lot about killing, tried to forget most of it. She waited, but he didn't say more. Whatever he'd seen, whatever he'd done, it was buried deep and he wasn't digging it up. Show me, she said instead. Show me how to defend this place. Over the next 2 weeks, they turned the mountain into a fortress. Caleb taught her everything. Where to position yourself for the best field of fire, how to use natural cover, how to move between positions without being seen. They dropped 3 trees across the trail at strategic points. Dug shallow rifle pits overlooking the approach routes. Cached ammunition and supplies at key locations. He taught her how to shoot from prone, from kneeling, from behind cover. How to compensate for wind and distance. How to reload fast, how to clear a jam, how to make every shot count. You hesitate, you die, he said one afternoon as she sighted down the rifle barrel. Someone's coming at you with a gun. You don't get to think about it. You don't get to feel bad. You shoot and you shoot to kill or they kill you. Understand? She understood. But understanding and doing were different things. I don't know if I can kill someone. Victor didn't have any trouble trying to kill you. Caleb's voice was hard. You think those men he'll bring care about your life? They'll shoot you dead and sleep fine that night. You need to be willing to do the same. That makes us just like them. No, they're coming here to take you back to hell or put you in the ground. We're defending our lives. Big difference. He looked at her straight. I need to know you can do this. Because when it happens, and it will happen, I can't protect you and fight them off at the same time. You need to be able to protect yourself. Mei Lin thought about Victor's hands around her throat, the beatings, the 3 years of torture and humiliation, the way he'd looked at her yesterday with pure ownership in his eyes. I can do it, she said. Then prove it. He set up targets at various distances, pieces of wood with crude human shapes drawn on them. Made her shoot until her shoulder was bruised from the rifle's kick, until she could hit center mass 9 times out of 10. Better, he said finally, but targets don't shoot back. Real people move, hide, shoot at you while you're shooting at them. It's chaos, loud, scary. You need to stay calm through all of it. How? Practice. And accepting that you might die. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Once you make peace with that, everything gets easier. She thought about that while she reloaded, made peace with dying. It should have terrified her, but after 3 years with Victor, death didn't seem like the worst thing anymore. April brought warmer weather and longer days. The snow retreated up the mountain, leaving behind mud and new grass and the first wildflowers. Mei Lin watched spring return and felt something shift inside her. The constant fear that had lived in her chest for so long was fading, replaced by something harder and colder. She wasn't healing. She was transforming. Caleb noticed. One evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sun set over the peaks, he said, "You're different." Different how? Harder, steadier. When you first got here, you flinched at every loud noise. Now you don't flinch at all. Is that bad? No, it's survival. But don't lose yourself completely. Don't let what he did turn you into something you're not. Maybe I'm finally becoming what I should have been all along. He looked at her with those winter sky eyes. And what's that? Someone who doesn't break. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You never broke. You bent. There's a difference." I felt broken. Feeling it and being it aren't the same thing. You survived 3 years of hell. That takes strength most people don't have. He stood up, stretched. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her into the forest, moving quiet and sure through the trees. They climbed higher, away from the cabin, until they reached a small clearing she'd never seen before. In the center stood 2 wooden crosses, weathered gray by time and weather. "My wife," Caleb said quietly, "and our daughter, She was 3 days old when the fever took them both. Maylin stood beside him, not knowing what to say. I buried them here because this was her favorite spot. She used to come up here and just sit, watching the mountains, saying it made her feel small in a good way. Made her problems seem smaller too. His voice was rough. After she died, I couldn't stay in town. Couldn't be around people living normal lives, having families, being happy. So I came up here and I've been here ever since. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. He turned to face her. What Victor did to you was evil, unforgivable. And if you want to hate him, if you want to kill him, I understand that. I'll help you do it. But don't let that hate eat you up inside. Don't let him take any more from you than he already has. How do you stop hating? You don't. Not completely. But you make sure it doesn't own you. You use it when you need it, then you put it away, and you live your life. He looked back at the graves. I spent 2 years after they died just hating everything. Hating the fever, the doctor who couldn't save them, myself for not being able to help. That hate damn near killed me. Finally realized I had a choice. Let it destroy me or learn to carry it without letting it run my life. Which did you choose? I'm still here, aren't I? They walked back to the cabin in comfortable silence. That night, Maylin lay in bed and thought about hate and survival and the difference between breaking and bending. Thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she was becoming. And she thought about Caleb Rourke, this hard, damaged man who'd saved her life and was teaching her how to save herself. She was starting to care about him in ways she hadn't expected, ways that scared her because caring meant vulnerability, and she'd sworn she'd never be vulnerable again. But maybe caring for someone who wouldn't hurt you wasn't vulnerability. Maybe it was something else. She fell asleep before she could figure out what. May arrived with wildflowers and deer in the meadows, and a sense of time running out. Caleb grew more watchful, more tense. He checked the trail approaches twice a day, kept a rifle close at all times, slept light. Something's coming, he said one morning, can feel it. How do you know? I just do. Too quiet. Birds aren't acting right, and Victor's had 2 months to plan. He's not going to wait much longer. 2 days later, Caleb found tracks. Multiple horses coming up the southern trail, the one they hadn't blocked because it was so steep and dangerous no sane person would use it. He's not stupid, Caleb muttered, studying the prints. Brought someone who knows the mountain. They came up quiet, probably scouting. They'll go back, tell Victor the route's clear, and then they'll come in force. How long do we have? A day. Maybe 2. He stood up, scanning the forest. We need to move some of our cache supplies, set up new positions. They know where we are now, so we need to make the approach as costly as possible. They worked through the day and into the night, repositioning ammunition, clearing fields of fire, setting up fallback positions. Maylin's hands were blistered by the time they finished. Her back ached, but she didn't complain. That night, Caleb pulled out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving and poured them each a measure. To survival, he said, raising his glass. To survival. She drank. The whiskey burned going down, but warmed her from the inside. They sat by the fire, not talking, just existing in each other's presence. Finally, Caleb said, If things go bad tomorrow, they won't. If they do, you take Meg and you ride north. There's a settlement about 30 miles that way past the big lake. People there are decent. Tell them Caleb Rourke sent you. They'll help. I'm not leaving you. You might have to. No. She looked at him straight. I spent 3 years being helpless. I'm done with that. We fight together or we die together. Those are the only options. Something crossed his face. Surprise, respect, something deeper he didn't name. All right then, together. They didn't sleep much that night. Took turns watching, rifles close, ears tuned to every sound. The mountain was silent except for the usual night noises. Owls hunting, the wind through the pines, the creek running cold and clear. Dawn came gray and misty. Caleb was at the window before the sun was up. They're here, he said quietly. Maylin joined him. Through the morning fog, she could see movement in the trees, men on horses spreading out, surrounding the cabin. She counted 8, maybe 10. Hard to tell in the mist. Victor was in the center, still favoring his broken wrist. Next to him rode a big man with a sheriff's badge catching the early light. The rest were hired guns, rough men with dead eyes and weapons they knew how to use. He brought the sheriff, Maylin said. Means he's trying to make this look legal. Probably has a warrant, maybe some fake charges. Caleb checked his rifle, calm and methodical. Doesn't matter, they're not taking you, Victor's voice carried across the clearing. Rourke, we can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Caleb opened the window just enough to shout back. Already told you, she's not yours. Go home. I've got the law on my side now. Sheriff Garrett's here to arrest her for theft and desertion. You harbor a fugitive, that makes you one too. Your sheriff doesn't have jurisdiction up here. This is federal land. He's got no authority. I've got authority wherever I say I do, the sheriff called out. He was a big man, running to fat but still dangerous looking. Send the woman out and maybe we'll forget about the kidnapping charges. She wasn't kidnapped. She left. Big difference. Not according to the law. Caleb laughed, cold and sharp. You want to talk about law? Let's talk about how Victor Hale beats his wife, how he tried to murder her, how half of Oakhaven saw her bruises and did nothing. Where was the law then, Sheriff? That's between a man and his wife. Not anymore, it's not. Victor's face was red even from this distance. Last chance, Rourke. Send her out or we come in. Caleb's answer was to close the window. He turned to Maylin. You ready? She picked up her rifle, checked the load. Her hands were steady. Her heart was racing, but her mind was clear. I'm ready. Remember what I taught you. Breathe, aim, squeeze, and don't stop shooting until the threat's down. They moved to their positions. Caleb at the front window, Maylin in the loft covering the side and rear approaches. From up here, she could see the whole clearing, every man, every movement. For a long moment, nothing happened. The men on horses just sat there, waiting to see if Caleb would change his mind. Then Victor raised his hand and dropped it. The first shot shattered the cabin's front window. Caleb returned fire immediately, the boom of his rifle impossibly loud in the confined space. One of the riders went down, clutching his shoulder. Then it was chaos. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Bullets punched through the cabin's walls, sending splinters flying. Maylin aimed at a man trying to circle around to the back, squeezed the trigger like Caleb taught her. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. The man fell from his horse. She'd just killed someone. There was no time to process it. She worked the lever, aimed at another target, fired again. A mounted man on the right side of the clearing. He ducked behind his horse, and she couldn't tell if she'd hit him. Below, Caleb was firing methodically, each shot carefully aimed. Another rider went down. The horses were panicking, rearing and bucking, making it hard for the men to hold their positions. Spread out, Victor was shouting. Get to the trees! The riders scattered, some dismounting and running for cover. Bullets continued to hammer the cabin. One came through the loft wall, inches from Maylin's head. She flinched but kept shooting. A man broke from the trees, running toward the cabin with a torch in his hand. Caleb shot him before he got 10 feet. The torch fell into the snow and went out. They're trying to burn us out, Caleb shouted up to her. I see them! 2 more men with torches coming from different angles. She shot at one, missed. Shot again, hit him in the leg. He went down, but the torch flew from his hand, landed on the cabin's porch. Flames started licking up the dry wood. Fire! Maylin shouted. Caleb left his position, grabbed a bucket of water they'd kept ready, threw it on the flames. They died, but the wood was scorched, smoking. Another torch came flying through the broken window. Caleb kicked it back out before it could catch. The shooting continued. Maylin lost track of time. There was only aim and fire and reload. Aim and fire and reload. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. Her ears rang from the constant gunfire. Smoke from the torches stung her eyes. A bullet hit the wall beside her and she felt a sharp pain in her cheek. Blood ran down her face. She wiped it away and kept shooting. Below, Caleb was bleeding too. His left arm hung limp, blood soaking his sleeve. But his right hand still worked, still aimed, still fired with deadly precision. Then suddenly, the gunfire stopped. The silence was shocking. Maylin's ears still rang. She could hear Victor shouting orders, the nervous stamping of horses, someone groaning in pain. Hold fire, the sheriff called out. Hold your fire! Caleb and Maylin waited, rifles ready, breathing hard. The sheriff rode forward slightly, hands visible, no weapon drawn. Rourke, you've killed 3 men and wounded 4 more. This is over. Surrender now, and maybe you live to see a trial. Trial? Caleb laughed, bitter and harsh. I know what kind of trial you're offering. Same kind you gave that woman Victor killed before Mei Lin. What was her name, Sheriff? The one who fell down the stairs? The sheriff's face went hard. Don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. You've been looking the other way for Victor Hale for years. How much does he pay you? Enough to sell your soul? Watch your mouth. Make me. The sheriff's hand moved toward his gun. Caleb's rifle tracked him. Go ahead, Caleb said quietly. See who's faster. The sheriff froze. Victor rode up beside him, face purple with rage. I'm done playing games, Sheriff. Do your job or I'll find someone who will. We've got them pinned down, the sheriff said. It's just a matter of time. I don't want to wait. I want my wife back now. She's not your wife anymore, Mei Lin shouted from the loft. Her voice was strong, clear, cutting through the morning air. I'm not your property. I'm not your victim. I'm done being afraid of you. Victor's laugh was ugly. You think hiding behind Rourke makes you safe? He can't protect you forever. I've got more men, more money, more power than you can imagine. I'll burn this mountain down if I have to. Then burn it. Caleb's voice was cold as winter. But you'll burn with it. Something changed in Victor's face. The rage gave way to something calculating, dangerous. All right. You want to make this difficult? We'll make it difficult. He turned to his men. Burn them out. All of you, torches ready. We rush the cabin at once. They can't stop us all. The remaining men looked at each other nervously. They'd signed on for an easy arrest, not a siege. 3 of their number were dead, 4 more wounded. The man and woman in that cabin were fighting like cornered wolves. But Victor was paying them, and money was money. They started preparing torches. Caleb looked up at Mei Lin. This is it. When they rush, we shoot as many as we can. If they get inside, we fight them hand to hand. You still with me? All the way. He nodded, something like pride in his eyes. You've become one hell of a fighter, you know that? I had a good teacher. Outside, the men were mounting up, torches lit and ready. 6 of them left, plus Victor and the sheriff. 8 against 2. Bad odds. Caleb reloaded carefully, methodically. Mei Lin did the same. Her hands didn't shake. The fear was there, but it didn't control her anymore. She thought about the woman who'd stepped off the train in Oakhaven 3 years ago, full of hope and stupid dreams. That woman would have begged for mercy, would have given up, would have let them win. But that woman was dead. In her place was someone new, someone who'd survived hell and come out the other side harder, colder, ready to fight. Victor raised his hand, the signal to charge. And in that moment, suspended between one breath and the next, Mei Lin made peace with whatever was coming. If they died here, at least they'd die free. At least they'd die fighting. At least Victor Hale wouldn't get the satisfaction of owning her ever again. Victor's hand dropped. The riders spurred their horses forward, torches held high, guns drawn. They came from 3 sides at once, a wave of violence and fire meant to overwhelm through sheer numbers. Caleb fired. One rider went down. Mei Lin fired. Another fell from his horse, torch flying wild. They worked together without speaking, a rhythm they'd developed over months of practice. Caleb covering the front, Mei Lin covering the sides. Shoot, reload, shoot again. The riders were close now, so close she could see their faces, see the fear and determination and greed that drove them. A torch hit the roof. Flames spread across the dry wood. Another torch came through the broken window. The cabin was burning. Keep shooting, Caleb shouted. The smoke was getting thick. Mei Lin's eyes watered, but she kept her position, kept firing. 2 riders made it to the cabin walls. She heard them below, trying to break down the door. Caleb left his window, stood by the door with his rifle ready. When it burst open, he shot the first man through at point-blank range. The second man got off a wild shot that missed, and Caleb clubbed him down with the rifle butt. The sheriff rode his horse right up to the porch, gun drawn. He aimed at Caleb through the smoke and flames. Mei Lin didn't think, just aimed and fired. The sheriff toppled from his horse, blood spreading across his chest. She'd killed the law. There was no going back now. The cabin was fully burning. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. They couldn't stay here much longer. Out the back! Caleb grabbed his rifle and a bag of ammunition. Move! Mei Lin scrambled down from the loft. Her lungs burned from smoke. The flames were everywhere now, eating the walls, the furniture, everything Caleb had built. They burst out the back door into chaos. 3 men were waiting. They opened fire immediately. Caleb shoved Mei Lin behind a woodpile and returned fire. 1 man went down. The other 2 dove for cover. Victor appeared around the side of the burning cabin, gun in hand. His face was a mask of rage and madness. He'd lost his men, his sheriff, his power to intimidate. All he had left was hate. "You ruined everything," he screamed at Mei Lin. "Everything I built, everything I am." "Good," she said, and shot at him. Missed. The bullet sparked off a rock beside him. Victor fired back. The shot went wide, but close enough that Mei Lin felt the air move. Caleb was fighting the other 2 men, couldn't help her. It was just her and Victor now, the way it should have been from the beginning. She worked the lever on her rifle, aimed more carefully this time. Victor was moving, trying to circle around for a better shot. She tracked him, waiting for her moment. "You were nothing when I found you," Victor shouted. "A Chinese whore from a matrimonial agency. I gave you a home, a name, a purpose. You gave me hell. I gave you what you deserved." He raised his gun, aimed straight at her heart. And Mei Lin, who'd spent 3 years afraid of this man, felt nothing but cold clarity. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The shot was true. Victor Hale staggered backward, looking down at the blood spreading across his chest with an expression of almost comical surprise. Like he couldn't believe this was happening. Like he couldn't believe the small Chinese woman he'd tortured for 3 years had just put a bullet in him. He tried to raise his gun again, but his strength was gone. He fell to his knees, then onto his face in the snow. The great and powerful Victor Hale died in the dirt, alone and unmourned, while his mansion's worth of ill-gotten power meant absolutely nothing. The last 2 hired guns saw their employer fall and decided they'd had enough. They ran for their horses and rode hard down the mountain, leaving their wounded and dead behind. Caleb lowered his rifle and looked at Mei Lin. "You all right?" She was staring at Victor's body, at the man who'd made her life a living hell, now just meat and bone and spreading blood. "I killed him," she said. "You defended yourself. Big difference." "Is it?" "Yeah." Caleb walked over, put a hand on her shoulder. "He came here to kill you, to take you back to a life of torture. You stopped him. That's not murder. That's survival." The cabin collapsed behind them with a roar of flames and sparks. Everything Caleb had built, gone. His home, his sanctuary, burned to ash because he'd chosen to help her. "Your cabin," she said, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. It's just wood and nails. We're alive. That's what matters." He looked around at the bodies scattered in the clearing, at the smoke rising into the morning sky. "But we can't stay here. Soon as those men get to town and tell their story, there'll be more coming. Federal marshals, maybe the army. We need to move." "Where?" "North. Canada's not that far. We can disappear up there, start over." He looked at her. "Unless you want to go back. Face the law, tell your side of the story." She thought about it for maybe half a second. Thought about courts full of men like Victor, judges who'd see a Chinese woman who killed a prominent white banker and wouldn't care about the bruises or the torture or the 3 years of hell. "North," she said. "We go north." They gathered what they could from the burning cabin. Weapons, ammunition, supplies. The horses were skittish from the gunfire and smoke, but Meg recognized Mei Lin and calmed down. They saddled 3 horses and loaded them with everything they'd salvaged. Before they left, Caleb walked to where his wife and daughter were buried. Stood there for a long moment, saying goodbye to ghosts. Mei Lin waited, giving him his time. When he came back, his eyes were wet, but his jaw was set. "Let's go," he said. They rode north as the sun climbed higher, leaving behind the burning cabin and the dead men and the life that was over. The mountains stretched before them, endless and unforgiving and beautiful. Mei Lin looked back once, just once, at the smoke rising into the clear spring sky. Then she turned forward and didn't look back again. They rode for 3 days straight, pushing the horses hard, stopping only when the animals were about to collapse. North through country that got wilder with every mile, through forests so thick the sun barely penetrated, across streams that ran fast and cold with snowmelt, over ridges where the wind cut like a blade. Caleb set a brutal pace. His wounded arm was wrapped tight, but blood still seeped through the bandage. He didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept moving with grim determination. Mei Lin followed, her body screaming protest. The cut on her cheek had scabbed over, pulled tight every time she turned her head. Her thighs were raw from the saddle, her hands blistered from the reins. But she didn't ask to stop, didn't ask to rest. She matched him mile for mile. On the third night, they made camp in a canyon so narrow you could touch both walls if you stretched. No fire, too risky. They ate cold jerky and drank creek water that made their teeth ache. "How's your arms?" Mei Lin asked. "Still attached?" Caleb was checking the bandage in the failing light. The wound had stopped bleeding, but it looked angry, red at the edges. "Let me see it. It's fine." "Let me see it anyway." He sighed but held out his arm. She unwrapped the bandage carefully. The bullet had gone clean through the meat of his bicep, missing bone and major vessels. Lucky. But the entrance and exit wounds were starting to show signs of infection. "We need to clean this properly," she said. "You have any whiskey left?" "Some. Was saving it for when we're safe." "You won't be safe if this goes septic." She dug through the saddlebags, found the bottle. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts. Pour it." She poured the whiskey over the wound. Caleb's jaw clenched, but he didn't make a sound. She cleaned both sides as best she could in the dim light, then wrapped it with the cleanest cloth she could find. "Thank you," he said. "You saved my life about 100 times. Figured I owed you." "We're past owing. We're partners now." He looked at her in the gathering darkness. Equals. Partners. Equals. Words that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Words she'd never thought she'd hear from any man. "Yeah," she said. "I guess we are." They sat in silence, backs against the canyon wall, sharing the whiskey bottle. The stars came out overhead, more stars than Mei Lin had ever seen, thick as spilled salt across the sky. "You ever think about what comes after?" she asked. "After what?" "After we get to Canada, after we're safe. What do we do then?" Caleb took a drink, passed her the bottle. "Build something new, I suppose. Find a place remote enough that nobody asks questions. Hunt, trap, survive. Together?" He looked at her. "You got other plans?" "No, I just—" She paused, trying to find words for something she barely understood herself. "I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without being owned by them. You're not owned by me. Never will be." "I know. But I don't know what we are either. You're not my husband, not my employer, not my— anything I have words for." "Does it need a word?" "I don't know. Maybe not." She took a drink, felt the whiskey burn. "I just know that I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is." "You won't. Long as you don't want to, you won't." His voice was quiet. "I'm not your jailer, Mei Lin. You want to leave, you leave. Want to stay, you stay. It's your choice. Always your choice." The simplicity of it almost made her cry. After 3 years of having no choices at all, the freedom was overwhelming. "I want to stay," she said. "Then stay." They finished the whiskey in comfortable silence and slept sitting up, rifles across their laps, ready to move at first light. The next morning brought rain, cold and steady. They rode through it, soaked to the skin, miserable but moving. The trail, if you could call it a trail, got rougher. They had to dismount and lead the horses across rock slides, through deadfalls, up slopes so steep the animals scrambled and slid. Around midday they crested a ridge, and Caleb stopped, studying the landscape ahead. Mei Lin pulled up beside him. "What is it?" "We're close. See that lake?" He pointed to a distant shimmer of water. "That's the border. Cross that, and we're in Canada." "How far?" "Maybe 10 miles, but it's rough country between here and there." He looked at the sky, at the rain still falling. "We push hard. We can make it by dark." They pushed hard. The horses were exhausted, stumbling on rocks, shying at shadows. Mei Lin's own exhaustion was a physical weight, dragging at her bones. But the thought of safety, real safety, not just temporary shelter, kept her moving. The rain turned to sleet as the afternoon wore on. Ice formed on the horses' manes, on their clothes, making everything slippery and dangerous. Twice Meg lost her footing and nearly went down. Each time, Mei Lin managed to keep her upright, but it was close. Caleb's face was gray with pain and exhaustion. His wounded arm hung limp, the bandage soaked through with blood and rain. He needed rest, needed medicine, needed things they didn't have. We should stop, Maylin said. You need to rest. We're almost there. Keep moving. Caleb, I said keep moving. His voice was hard, final. She let it drop. The lake appeared through the trees an hour before sunset, vast and gray and choppy with wind. On the far shore, barely visible through the sleet, Mei Lin could see smoke rising from chimneys. Buildings. Civilization. There's a settlement, Caleb said. Trapper town, mostly. Not much law, lots of people who don't ask questions. We get across that lake, we're home free. How do we cross? There's boats on the south shore. We steal one, row across, leave it on the other side. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. They worked their way down to the lake shore as the light failed. Found 3 small fishing boats pulled up on the beach, probably belonging to the trappers across the water. Caleb picked the most seaworthy looking one and started loading their gear. What about the horses? Mei Lin asked. He looked at Meg and the other 2 horses standing patient and exhausted in the sleet. We set them loose. They'll find their way down to the settlement eventually. Someone will take them in. It felt wrong, abandoning the animals that had carried them so far. But there was no way to get them across the lake, and they couldn't wait. Mei Lin removed Meg's saddle and bridle, ran her hand along the horse's neck one last time. Thank you, she whispered. Then she slapped Meg's hindquarters and sent her trotting away into the trees. They pushed the boat into the water and climbed in. Caleb took the oars despite his wounded arm, started rowing with grim determination. The lake was rough, waves slapping against the hull, wind pushing them sideways. Sleet stung their faces. Halfway across, Caleb's strength finally gave out. The oars slipped from his hands and he slumped forward, breathing hard. I got it. Mei Lin took the oars. Her arms burned, her back screamed, but she pulled with everything she had. The boat moved slowly across the dark water, each stroke a battle against wind and waves and exhaustion. She lost track of time. There was only the pull of the oars, the burn in her muscles, the shoreline that seemed to get no closer. Caleb was barely conscious, slumped in the stern, face white with blood loss. Stay with me, she said. We're almost there. He didn't answer. She pulled harder. The boat ground against rocks and sand. They'd made it. Mei Lin jumped out into knee-deep water, dragged the boat onto shore with strength she didn't know she still had. Got Caleb out and half carried, half dragged him up the beach. Lights ahead, buildings, voices. Help! She shouted. Someone help us! People came running, trappers, rough men in furs and homespun, but their hands were gentle as they took Caleb from her, carried him toward the nearest building. Someone wrapped a blanket around Mei Lin's shoulders. Someone else was asking questions in accented English, French maybe, or something else she didn't recognize. He's been shot, she managed. 3 days ago. Needs a doctor. We got no doctor. But Jacques, he knows some medicine. Come inside. They carried Caleb into a trading post that smelled like smoke and whiskey and wet furs. Laid him on a table. A big man with a wild beard, Jacques, presumably, started cutting away the bandage, examining the wound with practiced eyes. Infection bad, he said, but maybe not too late. You got money? Some. Mei Lin dug in her coat, found the small bag of coins Caleb had grabbed from the cabin. Jacques nodded. I do what I can. You wait. She waited, stood by the fireplace shivering, soaked and exhausted and terrified that after everything, Caleb would die here in this strange place. A woman brought her coffee and bread. Mei Lin couldn't remember her name, couldn't focus on anything except the big man working on Caleb's arm, cleaning the wound, packing it with something that smelled like pine and herbs. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything. Finally, Jacques straightened up, wiping his hands. He live, I think. Fever come maybe, but wound is clean now. He strong man. He fight. Thank you. The words felt impossibly inadequate. You need sleep. Both need sleep. Jacques gestured to a door in the back. Room there. Small but clean. Rest. I watch him tonight. Mei Lin started to protest, but her legs gave out and she had to grab the table to stay upright. Go, Jacques said kindly. You no good to him if you dead from tired. She let the woman lead her to the back room. It was tiny, barely big enough for the narrow bed, But it was warm and dry, and after 3 days in the saddle and a night crossing a storm-tossed lake, it looked like paradise. She collapsed onto the bed and was asleep before her head hit the pillow. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through a small window. For a moment she didn't know where she was, panic rising in her throat. Then memory returned, the lake, the settlement, Caleb wounded. Caleb. She stumbled out of the room. Caleb was still on the table, but he was awake now, propped up on rolled furs, drinking something from a wooden cup. He looked terrible, pale, drawn, exhausted, but alive. Relief hit her so hard she had to lean against the doorframe. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "You look like hell. You're one to talk." "Fair point." He set down the cup. "Jacques says we made it to Canada, says we're safe here." "Are we?" "Safe as we're going to get. Nobody here cares about American warrants. Half these men are probably running from something themselves." He tried to sit up straighter, winced. "We did it. We made it." Mei Lin crossed to him, sat on the edge of the table. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot and then rode across a lake." He managed a weak smile. "But I'll live. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. We got each other across." "Yeah, we did." He reached for her hand with his good arm, squeezed it. "Partners. Partners." They stayed at the trading post for 2 weeks while Caleb healed. The people there were exactly as he'd described. Trappers and hunters and folks running from past they didn't discuss. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared that Mei Lin was Chinese or that she and Caleb weren't married. They were just two more souls looking for a fresh start. Jacques' wife Marie taught Mei Lin how to cure furs and make soap and cook with the limited ingredients available this far north. She was a small woman with quick hands and a quicker laugh, and she never asked about the scars on Mei Lin's wrists or the haunted look that sometimes crossed her face. Caleb spent the first week mostly sleeping, fighting off the fever that Jacques had predicted. Mei Lin sat with him through the worst of it, wiping his forehead with cool cloths, making him drink water and thin broth. Once, delirious with fever, he called out for his wife and daughter. Mei Lin held his hand and told him they were safe, they were at peace, and eventually he quieted. By the second week he was up and moving around, arm in a sling but color returning to his face. They started making plans. "There's land east of here," Jacques told them one evening over dinner. "Nobody living there. Good hunting, good water. You want to build something, that's the place." "How far?" Caleb asked. 2 days' ride, maybe 3 with your arm like that." "We'll take it." Jacques provided them with supplies: flour, salt, ammunition, traps. Caleb paid with what little money they had left. It wasn't much, but Jacques seemed satisfied. "You good people," he said. "You come back if you need help, yes?" "Yes. Thank you." They left on a clear morning in late May, riding borrowed horses north and east into country that made Montana look civilized. The forest was thick and dark, full of bears and wolves, and silence so deep it felt like pressure on your ears. They saw no other people for 3 days. On the 4th day they found it, a valley nestled between 2 ridges, with a creek running through it and meadows that would be thick with grass come summer, mountains rising on all sides, offering protection and isolation. "This is it," Caleb said. "This is where we start over." They built a cabin that first summer, working from dawn to dark, felling trees and notching logs and raising walls. It was brutal work. Mei Lin's hands blistered and bled. Her back ached constantly, but she didn't complain. Just worked beside Caleb, matching him log for log. He taught her everything he knew: how to build straight and true, how to think 3 steps ahead, how to turn raw timber into something that would keep out the wind and cold. She learned fast, her movements becoming more confident with each day. By August, they had 4 walls and a roof. By September, they'd built a fireplace and chimney. By October, they had a door that actually closed and windows covered with oiled paper to let in light. It wasn't much. 1 room, maybe 15 feet square, with a dirt floor and gaps between the logs that would need chinking before winter. But it was theirs, built with their own hands, on land that nobody could take from them. The first night in their new cabin, they sat by the fire and shared a bottle of whiskey Jacques had given them as a parting gift. "To new beginnings," Caleb said, raising his cup. "To survival," Mei Lin replied. They drank. Outside, an early snow was falling. Inside, the fire crackled and the walls held back the cold. And for the first time in her life, Mei Lin felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "You ever think about them?" she asked. "The people we killed." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes, the sheriff especially. He was just doing his job, in his mind. His job was protecting a monster." "I know, but he probably didn't see it that way. Probably thought he was keeping order, following the law." He took a drink. "Doesn't mean he didn't deserve what he got. Just means it's more complicated than good and evil." Victor wasn't complicated. He was evil. Yeah, he was. Caleb looked at her. "You regret killing him?" She thought about it honestly. Searched her feelings for guilt, for remorse, for anything resembling regret. Found nothing. "No. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." "That's fair." He stood up, stretched. "I'm going to check the horses." "You good here?" "I'm good." After he left, Mei Lin sat by the fire and thought about the woman she'd been. The mail-order bride who'd stepped off the train in Oakhaven full of hope and fear. That woman had been soft, trusting, naive enough to believe that marriage meant partnership and that the world was fundamentally fair. That woman was dead. Killed by Victor Hale as surely as if he'd put a bullet in her. In her place was someone harder, colder, more dangerous. Someone who knew how to shoot and track and survive. Someone who'd killed without hesitation and would do it again if necessary. She should have felt bad about that transformation, should have mourned the loss of innocence, the death of hope. But she didn't, because that soft, trusting woman would never have survived, would have died in Victor's mansion, broken and forgotten. This new woman, hard and scarred and unbreakable, she could survive anything. Caleb came back in, stomping snow off his boots. "Horses are good. Snow's getting heavier, though. Going to be a bad winter." "We'll manage." "Yeah." He sat back down, close enough that their shoulders touched. "We will." They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just existing in each other's presence. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted between them. The partnership they'd forged in blood and violence deepened into something else, something neither of them had words for, but both of them felt. Mei Lin looked at him, this hard, damaged man who'd saved her life and taught her to save herself. Who'd lost everything, his home, his solitude, his peace, to help her. Who'd never asked for anything in return, never demanded, never expected. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For everything." He turned to look at her, those winter sky eyes soft in the firelight. "You don't need to thank me." "I know, but I wanted to say it anyway." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, careful, nothing like Victor's rough possession. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said quietly. "You know that?" "I didn't used to be." "Yes, you did. You just didn't know it yet." His hand lingered on her cheek. "The strength was always there. You just needed a chance to use it." Something in her chest cracked open. Not breaking. She was done with breaking. Opening, letting light in. She leaned forward and kissed him. He froze for half a second, surprised. Then he kissed her back, gentle and careful, and nothing like any kiss she'd ever had before. His hand cupped her face like she was something precious. His other arm came around her waist, holding her close but not tight, offering comfort, not control. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Is this okay?" he asked. "I don't want to push you into anything. You've been through enough." "I'm done with other people deciding what I'm ready for," she said. "I want this. I want you, if you want me. I've wanted you since the day I met you. Just didn't think I had the right to say it. You have the right. We both do. We have all the rights now." They made love that night by the fire, slow and careful, learning each other's bodies, each other's scars. It was nothing like the brutal possession she'd endured with Victor. This was mutual, equal, two people choosing each other freely. Afterward, they lay tangled together in blankets, the fire burning low, the snow falling outside. "You know we can never go back," Caleb said. "To the States, I mean. We're fugitives, murderers in their eyes." "I know. And this life? It's hard. Isolated. You'll probably never see another Chinese person again, never have the things you might have had in a city." "I don't care about cities. Don't care about things?" She turned to look at him. I care about being free. And I'm free here, with you. He pulled her closer. Then we stay. We stay. Winter came hard and fierce, burying their valley under 6 feet of snow. They spent long, dark months trapped inside the cabin, surviving on dried meat and stored provisions. It should have been miserable, claustrophobic, maddening. Instead, it was peaceful. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories they'd never told anyone. Caleb told her about the war, about the things he'd seen and done that still haunted him. She told him about her childhood in San Francisco, about her parents who'd died when she was young, about the loneliness that had driven her to answer that matrimonial ad. They taught each other things. He taught her to carve wood, to play cards, to read the weather in the sky. She taught him Chinese characters, writing them in the ash of the fire, laughing when he got them wrong. Taught him how to fold dumplings from memory, even though they didn't have the right ingredients. Taught him words from her language. Beautiful, strong, home. And slowly, carefully, they healed each other. The nightmares that had plagued Mei Lin since leaving Oakhaven started to fade. Some nights she still woke up gasping, feeling Victor's hands around her throat. But now there was Caleb beside her, solid and warm and safe, pulling her close and murmuring that she was safe, she was free, no one would ever hurt her again. Spring returned in April, melting the snow, turning the creek into a roaring torrent, filling the meadows with wildflowers. They planted a garden, potatoes, beans, squash from seeds Jacques had given them. Mei Lin tended it carefully, marveling at the way things grew when you gave them space and light and care. Summer brought deer to the meadows and fish to the creek. They hunted and trapped and dried meat for the coming winter. Built a smokehouse, a root cellar, a chicken coop. Slowly, methodically, they turned their rough cabin into a home. One evening in late July, they were sitting outside watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Mei Lin was mending a shirt, Caleb was sharpening knives. Ordinary work, ordinary peace. "You happy?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, considered the question honestly. A year ago, happiness had seemed impossible, a fantasy, something other people felt. But now, sitting here in the warm evening air, safe and free, and beside someone who loved her without trying to own her? "Yes," she said. "I'm happy. Are you?" "More than I've been in a long time." He set down the knife, looked at her. "I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone on that mountain. Thought that was what I deserved after Sarah and the baby died. But you changed that, changed me. We changed each other." "Yeah, we did." He reached for her hand. "I know we can't make it legal. No preacher up here, and even if there was, we're probably wanted for murder in 3 territories. But I want you to know you're my wife in every way that matters. My partner, my equal, my choice. And if you'll have me, I'm yours for as long as we both live." Mei Lin felt tears sting her eyes. "I'll have you, forever, if that's on offer." "It is." They didn't need ceremony or papers or anyone's approval. They had each other, and that was enough. As fall approached and the leaves started to turn, Mei Lin stood at the edge of the meadow and looked out at the mountains that surrounded their valley. Mountains that protected them, hid them, gave them space to build a life. She thought about the woman who'd gotten off that train in Oakhaven. How terrified she'd been, how small. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who could shoot straight and ride hard and survive winters that would kill softer people. Someone who'd faced evil and won. Someone who'd found love without losing herself. Someone free. And as the sun set behind the mountains and Caleb called her name from the cabin, Mei Lin smiled and walked home. The peace lasted 18 months, a year and a half of quiet mornings and hard work, of seasons turning and life taking root in that hidden valley. Mei Lin learned to love the rhythm of it. The sameness that would have driven her mad in another life now felt like freedom. Each day she woke up and chose what to do with her time. No one told her how to stand, what to say, when to be silent. But peace never lasts forever. She should have known that. It was late October when the stranger appeared. Mei Lin was in the garden harvesting the last of the squash before the hard frost came. The chickens were scratching nearby, the sun was warm on her back, and she was thinking about nothing in particular when she heard the horse. She straightened up fast, hand going automatically to the knife on her belt. Caleb was out checking trap lines, wouldn't be back until afternoon. She was alone. The rider came through the trees slowly, hands visible, clearly trying not to spook her. He was young, maybe 25, with a face that hadn't been beaten down by life yet. He wore decent clothes, rode a good horse, and had a badge pinned to his coat. A lawman. Maylin's blood went cold. "Ma'am," he called out, stopping at the edge of the clearing. "I'm Deputy Marshal Thomas Webb. I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then you should leave." Her voice was steady, even though her heart was hammering. "We don't want visitors." "I understand that, but I rode a long way to find you, and I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands away from his gun. "I have some news about Victor Hale." The name hit her like a fist. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in over a year, had tried not to even think it. "He's dead," she said flatly. "I know, I killed him." "Yes, ma'am, you did. And that's partly what I'm here about." He took a step closer. "Can we talk? Just talk. I give you my word, I'm not here to arrest anyone." "Your word doesn't mean much to me. Last lawman I met tried to help Victor take me back so he could kill me. That was Sheriff Garrett. And he's dead too, according to the reports. You shot him during the siege." Webb's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusing. "I'm not him. I'm not here on behalf of the Hale family or the town of Oakhaven. I'm here because there's things you should know." Maylin studied him. He was too young to be this far into the wilderness alone, unless he was either very brave or very stupid. His eyes were clear, honest-looking, but then again, Victor's eyes had looked honest too at first. "Say what you came to say. Then leave." Webb nodded, accepting the terms. "After you and Caleb Rourke disappeared, there was an investigation. Federal marshals came in, started asking questions. Turns out Victor Hale had enemies, a lot of them. Business partners he'd cheated, people he'd ruined. Once the law started digging, everything came out." "What everything?" "His first wife didn't fall down the stairs. Everyone knew it, but nobody would say it on record. But after he died, people started talking, gave statements, they found evidence. Letters she'd written to her sister back east describing the abuse, photographs of her injuries a doctor had kept hidden, enough to prove he murdered her." Maylin felt something twist in her chest. That poor woman, dead and buried and forgotten while Victor went on living. There was more, Webb continued, financial crimes, fraud. He'd been embezzling from his own bank, cooking the books, stealing from depositors. The whole thing was about to collapse. He probably would have ended up in prison even if you hadn't shot him. "So I saved the government the cost of a trial." A ghost of a smile crossed Webb's face. "That's one way to look at it. The point is, the official investigation concluded that you acted in self-defense. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Hale came after you with armed men, that he'd been abusing you for years, that the sheriff was corrupt and in his pocket. The federal prosecutor declined to press charges." Maylin blinked. "What? You're not wanted. Neither is Rourke. There's no warrant, no charges pending. You're free to go back across the border if you want to." Free? The word didn't make sense. She'd spent the last year and a half living as a fugitive, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the law to catch up. "I don't believe you. I brought the paperwork." Webb reached slowly into his coat, pulled out a folded document. "It's all official. Signed by the territorial judge and the federal prosecutor. You want to read it?" She took the paper with shaking hands, unfolded it. The legal language was dense and confusing, but the meaning was clear enough. The investigation into the deaths of Victor Hale and Sheriff Garrett had concluded that Maylin Jiang and Caleb Rourke had acted in lawful self-defense. No charges would be filed. "This could be a trick," she said. "You could be lying. I could be, but I'm not." Webb's voice was gentle. "Look, I know you've got no reason to trust lawmen. After what Garrett did, after what you've been through, I get it. But I'm telling you the truth. You're free. You can stay here. You can go back. You can do whatever you want. Nobody's hunting you." Maylin read the document again, trying to find the trap, the loophole, the lie. But it looked legitimate. Official seals, proper signatures dated 3 months ago. "Why did you come all this way to tell me this?" Webb was quiet for a moment. "Because someone should have protected you. Back in Oakhaven, someone should have stood up to Victor Hale, and they didn't. The law failed you. I can't fix that, but I can at least make sure you know you're not a criminal, that what you did was right." Something in his voice made her look at him closer. "You knew someone like Victor, didn't you?" His jaw tightened. "My sister. She married a man like that. By the time we figured out what was happening, it was too late. She died giving birth to a baby that probably wasn't even his, while he was off gambling and drinking with his friends. Nobody ever charged him with anything. He just moved on with his life like she'd never existed. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just know that what you did, fighting back, surviving, making him pay, some of us understand that. Some of us wish our sisters had been as strong as you. Mei Lin's throat was tight. Tell your sister I'm sorry she didn't get her chance. She knows. Wherever she is, she knows. Webb moved back toward his horse. I'll be going now. Left the paperwork with you in case you need it. There's also a letter in there from the prosecuting attorney. He wanted you to know that several other women have come forward with stories about Victor Hale. Your survival gave them courage to speak up. You probably saved lives. He mounted his horse, then paused. One more thing. The Hale estate is in probate. Turns out he had no legitimate heirs, and the bank seized most of his assets to cover the fraud. But there was a provision in the will. Any personal property belonging to his wife reverts to her upon his death. There wasn't much, but there's about $300 and some jewelry that legally belongs to you. If you want to claim it, the attorney's information is in that packet. $300. Her entire marriage to Victor, distilled down to pocket change and trinkets. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I don't want anything from him. That's your choice, but it's yours by right. Think about it. Webb tipped his hat. Good luck, ma'am. I hope you find peace up here. He rode away, disappearing into the trees as quietly as he'd come. Mei Lin stood in the garden holding the legal papers, her mind reeling. Free. She was free. Actually, legally free. When Caleb came back an hour later, she was still standing there. What's wrong? He dropped the rabbits he'd caught and crossed to her. What happened? She handed him the papers, watched his face as he read, watched understanding dawn. We're free, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it either. We're free. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. She felt his chest shaking and realized he was crying. Caleb Rourke, the hardest man she'd ever known, was crying with relief. I thought we'd be running forever, he said into her hair. Thought we'd never be safe. Me too. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the autumn sunshine, letting the weight of the last year and a half finally lift. That night they talked about what it meant, sitting by the fire, passing a bottle of whiskey back and forth, trying to process the impossible. We could go back, Caleb said. Cross the border. Go to Helena or Butte. Live like normal people. Do you want to? He was quiet, staring into the fire. Part of me does. Part of me misses civilization. Real coffee, newspapers, being able to buy things instead of making everything ourselves. But another part is afraid. Yeah, afraid that going back means dealing with all the ugliness we left behind. Afraid that we won't fit anymore after living like this. Mei Lin understood. She'd changed too much, become too different from the woman who'd lived in towns and followed rules and cared what people thought. The idea of going back to that world felt suffocating. What if we don't have to choose, she said. What if we stay here, but knowing we could leave if we wanted to? Knowing it's a choice, not a prison. That's still choosing to stay. I know, but it feels different when you're choosing it freely. He looked at her. You really want to stay? Out here, in the middle of nowhere, with just me and the chickens and 6 months of winter? I really do. This place, it's ours. Nobody can take it from us. Nobody gets to tell us how to live or who to be. That's worth more than coffee and newspapers. What about other people? Other Chinese people? Don't you want to be around your own kind? She thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss speaking my language, eating real food from home, seeing faces that look like mine. But I miss those things in Oak Haven too, and I wasn't free there. Here, I am. That matters more. Caleb nodded slowly. All right then. We stay. But we do it knowing we have options now. We're not trapped. We're not trapped. They drank to that, and to freedom, and to the life they'd built together. The winter that followed was the hardest yet. The snow came early and deep, burying their valley under 8 feet of white. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in minutes, and their breath turned to ice crystals in the air. They burned through their woodpile faster than expected, and had to snowshoe out in dangerous cold to cut more. Mei Lin got sick in January, a fever and cough that settled deep in her chest and wouldn't let go. Caleb nursed her through it, terrified that after everything they'd survived, he'd lose her to something as simple as winter illness. He made her drink pine needle tea for the vitamins, wrapped her in every blanket they had, stayed up nights listening to her breathe. She recovered, but it took weeks. Left her weak and shaky, unable to do much more than sit by the fire and cough. "I hate being useless," she said one afternoon, watching Caleb do all the work she should have been helping with. "You're not useless. You're healing. There's a difference. I should be stronger than this." "You are strong. Strongest person I know. But strong doesn't mean invincible. Everyone gets sick sometimes." He sat beside her, felt her forehead. "Besides, you took care of me when I was shot. Fair's fair." "That was different." "How?" "That was a bullet wound. This is just a cough." "Just a cough can kill you up here, same as a bullet. Maybe worse, because it's slower." He pulled her close. "Let yourself be weak for a minute. Let me take care of you. It doesn't make you less than what you are." She leaned into him, too tired to argue, and slowly she understood what he was teaching her, that being strong didn't mean never needing help, that surviving didn't mean doing everything alone, that the independence she'd fought so hard for didn't have to mean isolation. By March, she was back on her feet, thinner but healthy again. The fever had burned something out of her, not strength, but the last fragments of fear that had lived in her bones since Oakhaven. She'd faced death again, and won again. Each victory made her harder to kill. Spring returned with mudslides and flooding. Their careful garden was washed away, the chicken coop damaged. They had to rebuild, starting from scratch. It was frustrating, exhausting work. But they did it together, and by summer they had something better than before. That summer they got their first visitors since Deputy Webb, a family of settlers heading further north, looking for land. The husband was sick with fever, the wife was pregnant, and their 2 children were half-starved. They stopped at the cabin asking for help. Mei Lin's first instinct was to turn them away. Strangers meant danger, meant questions, meant complications. But when she saw those hungry children, she couldn't do it. "Come inside," she said. "We'll feed you." They stayed 3 days. Caleb treated the husband's fever with the same pine tea that had helped Mei Lin. She fed the children until their hollow cheeks filled out a little. The wife, a tired woman named Sarah, helped with chores and didn't ask intrusive questions. On the 3rd day, when the husband was well enough to travel, they prepared to leave. "Thank you," Sarah said, holding Mei Lin's hands. "You saved our lives." "Just passing on what was given to us. You're a good woman. I hope we meet again someday." After they left, Caleb found Mei Lin standing at the edge of the meadow, watching the family disappear into the trees. "You all right?" he asked. "I was thinking about the person I used to be, the one who got off that train in Oakhaven. She wanted to help people, to be useful, to matter. Victor beat that out of me, made me think the only thing that mattered was survival. But maybe," she paused, "maybe I can be both. Strong enough to protect myself and kind enough to help others." "You already are both." "I'm trying to be." Over the next year, more travelers found their way to the valley. Word had spread somehow that there was a cabin where strangers would be fed and helped, no questions asked. They came in dribs and drabs, trappers, settlers, prospectors, people running from something or toward something new. Mei Lin and Caleb helped them all, shared food when they had it, offered shelter during storms, pointed people toward game and safe routes, asked nothing in return except that they pay it forward when they could. It became a kind of purpose, this helping, a way to turn the pain they'd survived into something useful. Mei Lin found herself telling her story sometimes, to women who came through with bruises they tried to hide, with that particular kind of fear in their eyes. She'd tell them what she'd survived, what she'd become, that escape was possible, that they could be strong. Some listened, some left their men, some went back. Mei Lin couldn't save everyone, she understood that, but she could plant seeds. Let women know they had choices, even when it didn't feel like it. 3 years after the shooting, Mei Lin woke one morning and realized she'd stopped counting the days since Victor died. For so long, she'd marked time that way, days since the nightmare ended. But somewhere along the line, his death had stopped being the defining moment of her life. The defining moment was what came after: the building, the surviving, the loving, the becoming. She was 29 years old. She'd lived through hell and come out the other side. And she was happy. Not the naive happiness of her youth when she'd thought the world was fundamentally fair. This was harder, more complicated. The happiness of someone who knew exactly how dark things could get and chose joy anyway. One evening in late summer, she and Caleb were sitting outside watching the stars come out. They did this most nights now, this quiet ritual of existing together. You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped at that house? Caleb asked. If I'd just ridden past in the storm? You'd probably have frozen to death. Maybe. Or maybe I'd have made it to the line shack and never known you existed. Gone back to my cabin, lived out my life alone. Would you have preferred that? No, not even close. He took her hand. But I think about it sometimes. How random it was. I could have taken a different route, waited out the storm somewhere else, made 1,000 different choices that would have meant never meeting you, and my life would be so much smaller. Mine would be over. I'd be dead in the snow or back in that mansion wishing I was dead. You saved my life. You saved mine too, just in a different way. He looked at her. I was barely alive before you, just existing, breathing, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to actually live again. Maylin leaned her head on his shoulder. We saved each other then. Yeah, we did. They sat in silence, watching stars wheel overhead, listening to the creek and the wind and the small sounds of the night. After a while, Maylin said, Do you ever regret it, the killing, the running, everything we had to do? Caleb was quiet for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the world is the kind of place where men like Victor Hale can torture women for years and nobody stops them. I regret that we had to fight and kill just to be free. But do I regret what we did? No. We survived. We protected ourselves. That's not something to regret. Sometimes I feel like I should feel guiltier. About the sheriff especially. He had a family, and he chose to use his badge to protect a monster instead of the people he was sworn to serve. He made his choice. We made ours. It's still not simple. No, it's not. But simple and right aren't the same thing. He squeezed her hand. We did what we had to do, and we're living with it. That's all anyone can do. She thought about that, about the weight of having killed people, even in self-defense. It never went away completely, that weight. She'd learned to carry it, but it was always there. Maybe that was okay. Maybe feeling the weight meant she was still human, still moral, still someone who understood that taking a life was serious even when necessary. The next morning, Maylin was working in the garden when she found something strange. A small leather pouch, half buried in the dirt near the bean plants. She picked it up, opened it. Inside was $300 in bills and a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. For the woman who helped my family. You said you didn't want Victor Hale's money, so I'm giving you mine instead. Use it for good. Sarah. Maylin stared at this money. The settler woman from a year ago had somehow tracked down Victor's estate, claimed the inheritance on Maylin's behalf, and left it here as a gift. She showed Caleb that evening. What should we do with it? What do you want to do with it? She thought about it. $300 was a fortune up here. They could buy better tools, more supplies, livestock, make their lives easier. Or they could do something else. I want to help women like me, she said. Women who need to escape, who need a fresh start. What if we use this to help them? Set up a kind of, I don't know, a way station, a place they could come to be safe while they figure out what's next. Caleb nodded slowly. We'd need to build onto the cabin, maybe a separate building they could stay in. We'd need more supplies, more food stores. We could do it, if you're willing. I'm willing. It's a good use for Hale's money. Turn his evil into something useful. He smiled. Your evil into their chance. Poetic. Over the next year, they built a second cabin 50 yards from their own. Smaller, simpler, but solid and warm. They stocked it with supplies, blankets, basic tools. Put the word out through the travelers who passed through that any woman running from violence could find safety here. The first woman showed up in the fall. Young, maybe 20, with a black eye and a baby on her hip. She didn't give her name and they didn't ask, just fed her, let her sleep in the safety cabin, gave her space to breathe. She stayed 2 weeks, healing, gaining strength. When she left, she thanked them with tears in her eyes. I thought I was going to die, she said. Thought he'd kill me eventually, and nobody would care. But you cared. You helped. I won't forget that. More came after her. Not a flood, They were too remote for that, but a steady trickle. Women alone or with children, running from husbands or fathers or brothers who thought they owned them. Women who just needed a place to catch their breath before moving on. Mei Lin helped each one the way she wished someone had helped her, with food and shelter and no judgment, with practical advice about surviving in the wilderness, with the simple message that they deserved better, that violence wasn't their fault, that they could be strong. Some stayed a few days, some stayed months. A few decided to settle in the area, building their own cabins, starting their own lives. Slowly, very slowly, a community formed. Not a town, nothing so formal, but a loose network of women who'd escaped, who'd survived, who looked out for each other. 5 years after killing Victor Hale, Mei Lin stood at the edge of the meadow and watched the sun set behind the mountains. She was 31 years old. She had calluses on her hands and scars on her body and gray streaks starting in her hair. She was harder than she'd ever imagined becoming. But she was also happy. Deeply, genuinely happy in a way that had nothing to do with comfort or ease and everything to do with freedom and purpose and love. Caleb came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How far I've come. How different I am from the woman who got off that train." "Better or worse?" "Different. That woman was softer, kinder maybe, more trusting, but she wouldn't have survived. I'm glad I'm not her anymore." "I'm glad you're you." He kissed the top of her head. "The you that exists right now, strong and scarred and still standing." "We're both still standing." "Yeah, we are." They stood together as the light faded and the stars came out, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built something beautiful anyway. Later that night, lying in bed, Mei Lin said, "Do you think we'll grow old here, in this valley?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe someday we'll want to see what's over the next ridge. But wherever we end up, we'll be together. That's the only part that matters." "Promise?" "Promise." She fell asleep wrapped in his arms, safe and warm and free, and dreamed of nothing at all. The years passed. They got older, tougher, more weathered by the mountain life. Their hair went gray, their hands more gnarled with work. They survived hard winters and dangerous summers, sickness and injury, and all the small catastrophes that come with living far from civilization. But they survived together. The community of escaped women grew slowly. By the 10th year, there were 8 cabins scattered through the valley and the surrounding ridges. Women who'd found safety and decided to stay. Women who helped each other, protected each other, built lives on their own terms. They called the place New Haven, though there was no sign or official charter. Just an understanding among the women who lived there that this was a place where the old rules didn't apply, where being a woman didn't mean being property, where strength was measured by what you could survive, not by how well you obeyed. Mei Lin became something like an elder to the community, though she never asked for the role. Women came to her for advice, for help, for stories about surviving the unsurvivable. She taught them to shoot, to track, to be dangerous when they needed to be. And she told them her story, not all at once, and never the same way twice. But she told them about Victor Hale and what he'd done and how she'd finally put a bullet in him and walked away free. "The world tells us we're weak," she'd say, "that we need men to protect us, to give us value, to make us whole. But that's a lie. We protect ourselves. We give ourselves value. We make ourselves whole. Anyone who tries to take that from us is the enemy, no matter what the law says." Some people would call that philosophy dangerous, radical, a threat to the natural order. Mei Lin called it survival. On a warm summer evening, 15 years after killing Victor Hale, Mei Lin sat outside her cabin with Caleb and watched their small community gather for dinner. It had become a tradition. Once a month, all the women and children came together to share food and stories and company. There was Sarah, the settler woman who'd left the money. She'd come back 5 years ago with her children and without her husband, who'd beaten her one too many times. Now she ran a small trading post, brokering supplies between the community and the outside world. There was Margaret, a Crow woman who'd escaped a forced marriage to a white trader. She'd taught the community how to cure hides properly, how to read the weather, how to find food in the forest. There was young Anna, barely 18, who'd arrived 2 years ago pregnant and terrified. Now she had a healthy daughter and a cabin of her own and eyes that had learned to smile again. And there were others. Women who'd survived different hells but shared the same fierce determination to never be victims again. Caleb was the only man present, and he sat quietly at the edge, content to listen and observe. The women accepted him because Mei Lin vouched for him, because he'd proven over years that he respected their autonomy, their choices, their strength. As the sun set and the food was shared and the children played nearby, Mei Lin felt something settle in her chest. Not peace. She'd learned that peace was temporary, conditional, something you held on to as long as you could before the next fight came. But contentment. The knowledge that she'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into something meaningful, that her pain had become other women's salvation, that she'd survived and helped others survive. That night, after everyone had gone home, Caleb said, "You know what you've built here is extraordinary, right? This place, this community, it's something special. We built it, not just me. You started it. You showed them it was possible." He took her hand. "I'm proud of you. Proud of what you've become. I'm proud of us. Of what we became together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Mei Lin said, "I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. All right? Sometimes I'm glad Victor did what he did." Caleb went still. "What? I know that sounds wrong, but if he hadn't been who he was, if he'd been kind or even just indifferent, I'd have lived my whole life as his wife in that town. Small and quiet and obedient. I'd never have found my strength, never have met you, never have built this." She gestured at the valley around them. "His cruelty made me into someone who could survive anything, someone who could help others survive. So, in a twisted way, I'm grateful. That's not gratitude for him. That's you recognizing your own strength." "Maybe. But either way, I wouldn't change it. Even knowing the pain, the fear, all of it, I wouldn't change it because it led to this, to us, to all of this." Caleb pulled her close. "You're the most remarkable person I've ever known. You know that? I'm just someone who refused to break." "That's what makes you remarkable." Mei Lin thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train 15 years ago, full of hope and fear and dreams of a normal life. That girl was gone, had died a dozen times over in Victor Hale's mansion. But something better had taken her place. Someone forged in fire and violence and hard-won freedom. Someone who knew exactly how dark the world could be and chose to create light anyway. She didn't know how many years she had left. The mountain life was hard, took years off people. But however long she had, she'd spend it here, with Caleb, helping women find the strength she'd found. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Years later, when Mei Lin was old and gray and her hands didn't work quite right anymore, a young woman came to New Haven. She was Chinese, barely 20, with bruises on her arms and terror in her eyes. Mei Lin sat with her by the fire and listened to her story. A forced marriage to a white man in Seattle. Years of abuse. A desperate escape. "You're safe here," Mei Lin said in their shared language, words she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. "He can't reach you here. No one can hurt you here." The young woman stared at her. "You're Chinese too. I was told there were no Chinese this far north." "There aren't many, but I'm here, and you're here, and that's enough." Over the next weeks, Mei Lin taught her everything she knew. How to shoot, how to survive, how to be dangerous, how to transform fear into strength, pain into purpose. And she told her story one last time, about Victor Hale and the 3 years of hell and the night she put a bullet in him and walked away. "You killed him?" the young woman asked, eyes wide. "I defended myself. There's a difference. But yes, he died by my hand." "Do you regret it?" Mei Lin thought about the question she'd been asked 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. About guilt and justice and the weight of taking a life. "No," she said simply. "I don't regret surviving. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret becoming who I needed to be. And neither should you, whatever you have to do to be free." The young woman nodded, something hardening in her eyes. That particular transformation Mei Lin had seen so many times, the moment when a victim decided to become a survivor. "Thank you," the girl said, "for showing me it's possible. You would have figured it out on your own eventually. I just helped you get there faster." That winter was the hardest Mei Lin had faced. The cold settled deep in her bones and wouldn't leave. Caleb was slowing down too, his joints stiff, His breath labored on cold mornings. They were getting old. Time was catching up, but they faced it together, like they'd faced everything else. On a clear morning in late winter, Mei Lin woke before dawn and found Caleb already up, standing at the window looking out at the snow-covered valley. "You all right?" she asked. "Just thinking. About everything. About us." She came to stand beside him. And I'm grateful for all of it. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. Because they led me to you." He turned to face her. "I love you, Mei Lin Zhang. Have from the moment I saw you broken on that floor and decided I'd burn the world down before I let him hurt you again. I love you too. Always have. Always will." They stood together watching the sun rise over the mountains. Two old fighters who'd won their war and built something beautiful in the aftermath. And Mei Lin thought about the long, strange journey that had brought her here. From San Francisco to Oakhaven, to this remote valley. From victim to survivor, to warrior to teacher. From broken to bent to stronger than she'd ever imagined. The world had tried to crush her, had thrown everything it had at her. Violence, cruelty, injustice, hardship. And she'd survived it all. More than survived. She'd thrived. She'd built a life and a community and a legacy that would outlast her. She'd become exactly who she was supposed to be. And as the sun climbed higher and Caleb's hand found hers, Mei Lin smiled. Because this hard-won peace, this fierce freedom, this love that asked for nothing but gave everything, this was what victory looked like. Not perfect, not easy, not the fairy tale she'd once imagined, but real, earned, hers. And that was better than any fairy tale could ever be.